A towering fortress looms silently beneath the cold, pale moonlight. Deep underground, a stone staircase spirals down into absolute darkness. Behind heavy iron bars, a grim fate awaits the prisoner. The young man gasps for air, his face battered and broken. Chains bind him tight as searing heat radiates from below. A pale noble mocks the boy, fascinated by his family bloodline. He grips the prisoner's hair, bringing a glowing iron dangerously close. The tormentor smiles, speaking of a divine blessing wasted on him. Searing metal meets flesh in a burst of agonizing steam. The prisoner throws his head back, choking on his own pain. His captor sneers, calling the boy cursed yet annoyingly resilient. Broken and desperate, the prisoner finally begs for an end. Tears mix with blood as he pleads for death's sweet release. The noble just laughs, mocking his victim's ruined ability to speak. Bored with the lack of results, the torturer dismisses the session. He reminds the boy that dying is a luxury he cannot afford. A sudden realization strikes the villain about the passage of time. The prisoner hangs limp, his body a living map of agony. Outside, the moon bears silent witness to 3 long years. The cell remains a cold, bloody chamber of endless despair. 3 years of torture have marked the anniversary of his hell. The boy's mind drifts back to the glorious legacy he lost. The Sermon family once flew their banner with immense pride. They stood guard against the endless tides of the Dark Zone, a wall of steel defending the continent from savage demonic beasts. Their knights fought bravely as one of the 5 great houses. They were the mighty shield of the land, unrivaled in power. But when their leaders vanished, the great house burned to ash. The rival Powden family seized the chance to crush their competition, all to steal the legendary dragon's bloodline from a helpless infant. The blood running through his veins promised godlike potential to those born lucky. A true heir could have mastered the highest circles of magic before hitting puberty, or they could have become a peerless swordmaster while still just a teenager. But fate, having a twisted sense of humor, had other plans for him. Instead of gifts, the boy inherited a nightmare that shackled his very soul. It was a rare affliction that plagued his lineage only once every few centuries. The ancient and malevolent curse of the Demon King, Arcan. Under its weight, his potential was locked away behind unbreakable spiritual chains. He was left completely unable to wield a sword or cast a single spell. In the darkness, he fantasizes about the life stolen by this cruel affliction. With that power, his family might still be alive and standing tall today, and he wouldn't be a plaything for Sense Patton's twisted medical curiosity. But fantasy offers no comfort when reality is bleeding from his eyes. Even the rats in the dungeon seem to pity his absolute exhaustion. A strange sensation washes over him as the vermin scurry closer with glowing eyes. His body knows before his mind does that the end has finally arrived. The last embers of his life force begin to flicker and fade into the cold. The moment of transition hangs heavy in the stagnant, bloody air. Tears of blood wash away the last of his earthly regrets. He welcomes the encroaching darkness as a long-awaited friend. But as death approaches, a terrifying purple aura erupts from the void. Visions of a mighty warrior standing atop a slain beast flood his dying mind. He sees a version of himself draped in glory rather than rusty chains. A massive green dragon roars in the face of a fearless challenger. The hero in the vision possesses the piercing, confident gaze of a true predator. He moves with a speed and ferocity the prisoner could only ever dream of. The hallucination plays out a legendary battle against overwhelming odds. A golden spirit descends from the heavens, blessing the warrior with divine light. A mysterious golden figure smiles, as if orchestrating the entire spectacle. The warrior charges forward, wielding power that defies the curse itself. A blinding pillar of divine light descends, shattering the darkness of the dungeon. The golden entity stands over his corpse, intervening at the very threshold of death. A voice resonates from the light, offering to grant the dying boy a single wish. His eyes snap open, gasping for air as if waking from a terrible nightmare. A frantic scream pierces his ears as a maid discovers her young master awake. Vitality returns to his eyes, the dull gaze of a prisoner replaced by shock. He calls out to Colin, unable to believe his loyal nanny is standing there alive. She looks at him with concern, wondering why he is acting so strange and intense. Outside, the magnificent Sermine estate stands proud, untouched by the fires of ruin. Desperate for confirmation, he demands a mirror, startling the poor maid even further. The reflection reveals a healthy, youthful face that hasn't seen a day of torture. He asks for the date, and Colin confirms it is August of the year 1892. The realization hits him like a hammer. The timeline has completely reset. He has been transported back to when he was just 12 years old. Memories of the future flood his mind, overlapping with the peaceful room. He recalls the exact moment the glorious Sermon family began its tragic fall. The fires, the screams, and the betrayal by the rival Peyton family play out again. He sees the face of the man who orchestrated their destruction and stole his life. The image of the golden dragon flashes in his mind, the being that granted his wish. He clenches his jaw, realizing this isn't a dream but a second chance at life. Heavy, authoritative footsteps echo from the hallway, signaling a new arrival. An older man enters, assuming the boy is feigning illness to skip his duties. The boy's eyes widen as he recognizes the stern figure standing in the doorway. It is Alejandro, the knight commander who died defending their family in the original timeline. Seeing the boy's state, the commander sighs and offers to cancel the day's training, but the boy interrupts firmly, refusing to take the easy way out this time. Colin is so shocked by his sudden diligence that she looks ready to faint. The commander narrows his eyes, suspicious of this sudden change in personality. With a confident grin, the boy declares he is fine and asks what the lesson is. The old knight is baffled, but answers that they are scheduled for longsword footwork. The old knight questions if this confident child is truly the young master he knows. Ryun grips the wooden hilt, his knuckles turning white with newfound resolve. He affirms his identity as Ryun Sermine with absolute, unshakable conviction. Alejandro is left bewildered, sensing a shift in the boy's soul that he cannot explain. The mechanics of time travel matter far less than the vengeance he plans to exact. He demands to skip the boring drills and jump straight to monster hunting. He views this new timeline as a singular golden opportunity to change fate. His eyes burn with a blue intensity that defies his physical age. It is the only way to rewrite the bloody history that destroyed his family. The pristine walls of the estate hide the dark training about to begin. A holographic status window appears, confirming his stats are still tragically low. Despite the curse, he is relieved that his unique system interface still functions. It is a secret power that sets him apart from everyone else on the continent. With the preparations complete, he faces his first test under the morning sun. The training grounds are silent, waiting for the clash of wood and bone. A chained goblin snarls, its eyes burning with feral hunger and malice. The beast lunges, testing the limits of the iron chain holding it back. It lets out a piercing shriek, thrashing violently against the wooden pillar. Colin watches with bated breath, terrified for her fragile charge. She begs the commander to intervene, citing the boy's history of fainting at such sights. Ryun knows she is right. Yesterday, this sight would have broken him instantly. He closes his eyes, steadying his breathing against the rising tide of panic. But when he opens them, a blue light pierces through the fear. Suddenly, red warning screens flood his vision as the ancient curse activates. The curse of Arkan forces a paralyzing supernatural terror into his mind. Alejandro notices the boy trembling and prepares to step in to save him. The commander decides the experiment is over and calls for an immediate halt. But Ryun plants his foot, refusing to let the fear win this time. The goblin snaps its jaws, sensing the prey is frozen in place. Sweat pours down his face, but his eyes remain locked on the enemy. Ryun plants his feet firmly on the ground, refusing to retreat a single inch. He steels his mind, reminding himself that a lone goblin is nothing compared to his past hell. The terror of the curse pales in comparison to the monster who tortured him for 3 years. The goblin's glowing eyes try to instill fear, but the tactic is failing miserably. Memories of a far greater evil, a golden-armored tyrant, flood his mind. That golden figure was the true embodiment of despair, not this lowly creature. Facing the phantom of his tormentor makes the goblin look like a harmless toy. With a roar of defiance, he swings the wooden practice sword with all his might. The blow connects with a heavy impact, sending shockwaves through the beast. Alejandro and Colin watch in stunned silence, unable to process the sudden violence. A system notification pops up, confirming that his bravery has weakened the ancient curse. The tables turn completely as the goblin cowers beneath the wooden blade, paralyzed by fear. Ryun stares down with cold, glowing eyes, his panic replaced by absolute dominance. He turns to the commander and demands a real steel blade to finish the job properly. Colin looks ready to pass out as Alejandro hands over the lethal weapon with hesitation. A dark, satisfied grin spreads across the young master's face as he grips the hilt. Alejandro is overcome with emotion, his face flushing with sudden, intense pride. In his eyes, the fragile boy has finally taken the first crucial step toward manhood. The goblin trembles against the post, realizing its role as a training dummy is officially over. Ryun raises the steel sword, blue energy crackling around his vision as he prepares to strike. The blade descends in a merciless arc, ending the creature's miserable existence in an instant. Alejandro sees a ray of hope for the Sermon family in the boy's ruthless efficiency. Standing over the defeated monster, Ri-yun looks every bit the future family head. Later, the estate returns to its peaceful silence, masking the violence that just occurred. Ri-yun splashes cold water on his face, washing away the sweat of his first kill. He stares into the mirror, grounding himself in this new reality while water drips from his chin. The reflection of his tortured past overlaps with his healthy present, a haunting reminder of the stakes. He confirms that the system interface is fully functional and ready to serve his ambitions. A golden card appears in the air, tallying the rewards for his first victory. But the experience points are pitifully low, and he realizes he needs a much bigger army to slaughter. The math doesn't add up. Hunting goblins one by one will take centuries he doesn't have. Time is a luxury he cannot afford as the fiery destruction of his house looms in the future. He looks in the mirror, but the reflection of his tortured future self stares back. He grips the system card, determined to squeeze every drop of advantage from this second life. The Sermine family is a ship without a captain, drifting since his father vanished 2 years ago. Enemies are already sharpening their knives, waiting for the noble house to collapse. He clenches his fist, confirming that physical leveling is valid but painfully slow. With a confident smirk, he decides it's time to unlock a faster, more dangerous path to power. A woman with hair like spilled blood and a mask of cold steel strides through the halls. The estate is quiet, unaware that a conversation determining its future is about to happen. Ri-yun faces Sena, the family's most enigmatic powerhouse, with the poise of a veteran. She looks at him like he's asked for a pet dragon, skeptical of his request for magic training. Her posture screams boredom, clearly thinking this is a childish whim. She flares her power, introducing herself as the Magic Division Commander to intimidate him. Ri-yun remains unfazed, knowing she stands on equal footing with the mighty Alejandro. She is a ghost in the records, a secret weapon known only to the missing family head. She asks if his little victory against a goblin has given him delusions of grandeur. She explains that magic isn't like swinging a stick. It requires a gift he simply doesn't have. With a cruel smile, she pokes at his deepest wound, his complete lack of talent. Ri-yun admits he remembers the curse well. It's been his constant, suffocating companion. He calmly recounts how his body was a spiritual dead zone, unable to sense even a wisp of mana. But his eyes ignite with blue light as he reveals that the rules of the game changed yesterday. Sena's composure cracks, her mask unable to hide the shock of his declaration. The tea in his cup trembles, reacting to the sudden density of power in the room. A massive, invisible fire dragon roars into existence behind her, a test for his new eyes. She challenges him to describe the masterpiece she just painted with pure energy. Ri-yun's gaze pierces the veil, seeing the mana construct as clearly as the furniture. He identifies the technique instantly, proving that his blindness to magic is cured. Sena is left sweating, realizing the crippled young master is seeing things he shouldn't. He explains that while he can see it, he needs a cultivation technique to anchor the power inside. Ri-yun smiles playfully, admitting that in his current state he couldn't stop her even if he wanted to. His expression softens as he confesses that she is the only person he can trust with this dangerous request. His mind drifts back to the tragic end of the previous timeline, where loyalty was tested by fire. He remembers sitting helplessly in the ruins of his home, awaiting the inevitable end. Even then, Sena had fought like a demon, her mask shattered but her resolve harder than steel. She had burned her own life force to buy him time, smiling even as she disintegrated into light. She was the loyal retainer who shielded him until her very last breath, a debt he can never repay. He speaks her name with a profound weight, acknowledging the bond that only he remembers. Sena is caught off guard by his raw sincerity, a rare blush coloring her usually stoic features. With the agreement made, he discards his shirt, preparing his body for the ordeal ahead. He kneels on the floor, ancient markings glowing faintly on his skin as he centers his breathing. Sena announces the beginning of the ritual, filling the room with a dense, suffocating magical aura. She initiates the Blue Earth cultivation technique, a secret art reserved strictly for the direct bloodline. Her hands weave complex patterns, guiding the volatile mana directly into his dormant core. Ri-yun recognizes the flow, recalling how he used this very method to gain power in a different life. She warns him to concentrate, but the sudden influx of power feels like liquid fire in his veins. Her hands press against his back, acting as a conduit for energy that threatens to tear him apart. She demands absolute stillness, warning that a single slip in concentration could be fatal. The energy shifts to a toxic green, and she offers him a chance to stop before the pain becomes unbearable. Agony rips through his nervous system, a searing pain that eclipses anything physical he has felt today. But his mind flashes back to the dungeon, where pain was not a moment but an endless, bloody reality. He remembers the sadistic smile of the man who broke him, a memory that fuels his endurance. Compared to the hell of his past, this burning sensation is merely a stepping stone to vengeance. He grins through the torment, reaffirming his absolute trust in her abilities to keep him alive. Sena accepts his resolve, closing her eyes to pour even more power into the ritual. Her magical avatar manifests behind him, a towering presence forcing the mana into submission. His body becomes a battlefield of energies, his eyes glowing with a terrifying golden light. Suddenly, the system screams a warning as the ancient curse of Arcan wakes up to fight back. Sena feels the malevolent resistance, confirming the rumors of the terrible affliction haunting his bloodline. Instead of retreating, she doubles down, flooding his system with enough mana to crush the curse's resistance. Sena grits her teeth, realizing that brute force alone isn't enough to crack this nut. Even the mana of a legendary archmage falls short against a curse of this magnitude. But Reencarna isn't trying to overpower it. He's using a technique from a forgotten era to ride the wave. He intends to trick the curse, turning his own body into a prison for the volatile energy. Sena watches in disbelief as the mana that should be scattering is instead being absorbed. The system interface flashes rapidly, signaling a violent clash between the curse and his will. It is a digital tug of war, with his very life hanging in the balance of those notifications. Inside, his mana pathways are being scorched as if molten lead is being poured through his veins. Yet his eyes burn with a defiance that refuses to acknowledge the concept of surrender. He recalls the countless battles of his past life, where pain was just another Tuesday. He was the master player who stood toe-to-toe with dragons, not some helpless victim. That bloody, glorious history is the fuel that keeps his mind from shattering under the pressure. His physical body might be young, but his soul holds the wisdom of a grandmaster. The knowledge of mana manipulation is etched into his spirit, bypassing his physical limitations. He finally confronts the spectral visage of Arcan, the demon king responsible for his suffering. But compared to the golden tyrant he faced at the end of the world, this demon is a joke. A complex crest of light forms in the void, sealing the new power deep within his core. With a final primal roar, Reencarna shatters the limits that held him back for so long. The energy storm dissipates, leaving Sena staring at a boy who just achieved the impossible. Gravity finally reclaims him as his body shuts down from the sheer exhaustion of the ritual. Sena rushes forward, panic replacing her earlier stoicism as her young master collapses. Reencarna drifts in and out of consciousness, noting that while it hurts, he is still alive. Because no matter how bad this burns, it is a gentle tickle compared to his previous life. His mind drifts back to the cold dungeon, where masked figures treated him like a slab of meat. He remembers the callous voices of his captors, deciding that he was no longer useful as a lab rat. A blade slices through the air, intended to end his misery in the most efficient way possible. But steel meets steel in a shower of sparks, halting the execution at the last second. A mysterious hooded figure stands between the prisoner and death, radiating a lethal aura. The torturers recoil in shock, realizing their secure facility has been breached by a monster. Chaos erupts in the darkness as the intruder prepares to paint the dungeon red. The boy's mind is dragged back into the cold, moonlit nightmare of his past. He walks the blood-soaked path of memory, where death was the only constant. A familiar voice calls out to him in the darkness, checking if he is still breathing. It is Alejandro, looking far older and more broken than the man standing in the room today. The old knight apologizes through a mask of blood, regretting that he arrived too late. The prisoner's eyes widen in disbelief, realizing his commander came for him against all odds. Alejandro offers a final comforting smile, hiding the fatal cost of his loyalty. The reality is revealed as the knight dies on his knees, his back riddled with enemy arrows. Reencarna screams in pure agony, watching his only hope fade into the abyss. The tears of the past bleed into the present as he wakes from the trauma. He gasps for air in his soft bed, the phantom pain of loss still stinging his eyes. He looks at his hand, needing to confirm that the power he just fought for is real. The memory of Sena and Alejandro lying dead in pools of blood hardens his resolve. He swears that this time will be different, for he finally has the strength to fight back. Golden particles dance in his palm, but he realizes this light must remain hidden in the shadows. The Peyton family is watching like hawks, and showing his hand now would be suicide. He decides on a paradoxical strategy. To save the family, he must first let it appear to fall. The sun rises over the estate, unaware of the deception about to take place within. Ryun puts on his best acting face, scratching his head and claiming the ritual was a total failure. Sena freezes, her mask unable to hide the sheer disbelief at his statement. The room falls into an awkward silence as the two powerful adults process the bad news. Ryun feels a pang of guilt, knowing he has to lie to the people who died for him. But in this timeline, information is a weapon, and he cannot trust anyone fully just yet. He lies with a straight face, claiming he feels absolutely zero mana in his core. Sena isn't buying it so easily and extends a glowing hand to verify his story. She politely but firmly insists on checking his condition herself to understand what went wrong. Her eyes flare with intensity as she activates a high-level mana detection spell. She grabs his wrist, pumping her own energy into him to seek out the truth. Magical energy swirls around them, a silent battle between her detection and his concealment. Her jaw drops as she finds nothing, completely fooled by his perfect suppression technique. Sena insists that she felt a surge of power yesterday, refusing to accept that it simply vanished. She stumbles back in shock, her magical senses completely baffled by his empty reading. Alejandro watches the exchange, the hope in his eyes rapidly dimming into deep concern. The old knight quickly pivots to damage control, urging the boy to focus on swordsmanship instead. Ryun plays the part of the frail victim perfectly, claiming the exertion nearly killed him. Alejandro is visibly shaken, believing he pushed the fragile young master far beyond his limits. He clenches his fist in frustration, mourning the loss of the potential he thought he saw. Time begins to slip away as the golden leaves of autumn signal the changing seasons. 2 months pass in the blink of an eye, burying the estate under a blanket of winter snow. Colin exits the young master's room, her shoulders slumped with a heavy burden. She worries for Ryun, who has seemingly retreated into a shell of total isolation. The portrait of the lady of the house watches over a family that is slowly running out of options. Even the most loyal servants can feel the foundations of the great house beginning to crack. Gossip spreads through the halls as the staff questions why the boy never leaves his room. A butler notes with disdain that the so-called prodigy hasn't touched a sword in months. He mocks the boy's brief moment of glory as nothing more than a fever dream. Colin snaps back furiously, refusing to let them slander the boy she helped raise. But her defense is drowned out by the growing whispers labeling him an omen of doom. To the outside world, Ryun has become the scoundrel of sermon, a disappointment to his name. The staff argues that high expectations only lead to harder falls, especially for a dying house. Rats are the first to flee a sinking ship, and the employees begin resigning one by one. Colin is left speechless when asked if she intends to abandon the family as well. Her loyalty wavers only for a moment before her thoughts return to the boy behind the door. Inside the room, a hand reaches for a meal that has lost its former luxury. Ryun notes the drop in food quality, a clear sign that the family vault is running on fumes. A terrifying grin spreads across his face, revealing that this financial ruin is exactly what he wanted. His past self would have wasted resources trying to patch the holes in the sinking ship. But with the wisdom of a veteran warrior, he knows that sometimes you have to let it burn to build it back stronger. He is biding his time in the shadows, letting his enemies believe the Sermon family is finished. He reflects on the missing family head and brothers, the vacuum of power that started this whole mess. The training grounds, once a hive of elite activity, now stand as a hollow shell of the past. Only a handful of unmotivated, unskilled knights remain to guard the fading legacy. Under the cold night sky, the swords of visiting vassals stand abandoned in the snow. Disappointed nobles turn their backs on the chaos, abandoning the Sermine family to its fate. Ryun lounges in his room, pleased that the estate's decline allows him to act lazy in peace. However, he notes with a frown that the family isn't collapsing quite fast enough for his plans. His plotting is rudely interrupted as the door bursts open, revealing a frantic Colin. She announces with terrifying enthusiasm that the Knight Commander is waiting for his training. Ryun tries to burrow back under the covers, feigning the exhaustion of a delicate invalid. But Colin is having none of it, ripping the blanket away with the force of a hurricane. The young master is left exposed and confused, realizing his nanny has finally snapped. Without a word, she scoops him up effortlessly, carrying him like an unruly toddler. Her eyes burn with a manic determination that terrifies him more than any dungeon torturer. In her mind, he is still the helpless infant she swore to protect and nurture forever. Ryun accepts his fate as he is hauled out into the blinding light of the hallway. The estate stands silent, witness to the daily struggle between a lazy master and his devoted servant. Alejandro's voice booms across the courtyard, frustrated by the boy's improper grip. Ryun lazily taps the wooden post, listening to a lecture about mana he already mastered years ago. The old knight refuses to give up, unaware that his student's boredom is a carefully crafted mask. Under the cover of night, the real work begins as Ri-yun trains his body in secret silence. He utilizes a stealth technique called body domination to mask his true physical condition. The green aura hides his growing muscles, projecting an image of frailty to the outside world. During the day, a subtle system notification chimes as he strikes the training post. His stamina climbs steadily, unnoticed by the watchful eyes of his instructor. A smirk touches his lips as his strength increases right under Alejandro's nose. Sensing a breakthrough, he feigns a bathroom emergency to escape the commander's scrutiny. Safely behind a locked door, he lets the suppression technique flare to life. He observes the green energy, noting that sudden movements still threaten to break the illusion. With a focused gaze, he summons the status window to audit his progress. The numbers confirm that 3 months of deception have yielded excellent results. He strides through the halls, mentally organizing his stat points like a gamer preparing for a raid. His internal strategy session is interrupted by the sight of Alejandro speaking with a visitor. It is Truno Hilda, the family's head steward, looking apologetic for disturbing the training schedule. The steward holds a sealed scroll, and Ri-yun's future knowledge instantly identifies the message. He unfurls the parchment, confirming that the timeline is moving exactly as he remembers. It is a royal summons to the birthday celebration of the second prince, Kyle Darren. A wicked grin spreads across his face as he recalls the significance of that specific date. This invitation is the final trigger needed to accelerate his family's calculated collapse. Soon, a carriage rattles along the country road, carrying a very bored young master. The steward notes his fatigue, unaware that his nanny used him as a fashion doll all night. He shudders at the memory of Colin's terrifying enthusiasm for coordinating his outfit. The steward explains that their heavy hitters, Alejandro and Sena, will not be joining the trip. A sudden monster outbreak has conveniently kept the family's protectors occupied elsewhere. Alejandro has been deployed to the border to hold back the encroaching tides of darkness. Meanwhile, Sena is tied up in a mandatory meeting with the acting family head. This leaves a 12-year-old child as the sole representative of the house, a recipe for disaster. The steward remains blissfully confident that their family name still commands respect. Ri-yun knows better, fully aware that their reputation is currently worth less than dirt. In the glory days, a servant could have attended, but now the fallen house must beg for relevance. He leans back with the smug satisfaction of a man watching his own house burn down on purpose. A white dove soars over the gleaming spires of the capital city, Derbon. The carriage rolls toward the magnificent white walls of the royal seat. A grand reception awaits, with servants lining the path to welcome the distinguished guest. Ri-yun steps out into the sunlight, playing the part of the noble heir to perfection. The host greets him with a title that feels more like a mockery than a compliment. It is Prince Kyle Darren himself, wearing a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Truno bows deeply while Ri-yun offers the polite courtesies expected of his station. But behind the pleasantries, the young master senses the underlying tension in the air. His magical eye activates, scanning the surroundings for threats hidden beneath the luxury. As they move through the streets, he feels the pitying stares of the citizens weighing on the carriage. Rumors of his incompetence spread through the dark windows of the capital like wildfire. Ri-yun walks through the crowd, letting the whispers of hopeless scoundrel wash over him. He feels the shadowy judgment of the elite, exactly as he orchestrated. A satisfied smirk remains hidden, for everything is proceeding according to his design. The days drift by under the bright, indifferent sky of the royal city. He plays the role of the bumbling country bumpkin to absolute perfection. His steward Truno buries his face in his hands, dying of second-hand embarrassment. The high society vultures snicker, delighted by the fall of a prestigious house. But beneath the mask of a fool, a predator's eyes gleam with amusement. Gossip echoes through the marble corridors of the palace guest quarters. His escort knights sit around eating, bored out of their minds by the inactivity. They were supposed to be networking with other delegations days ago. Instead, their charge seemingly froze up and fled from social interaction. He locked himself in his room upon arrival and hasn't been seen since. 5 days of total isolation have left his guards crying into their bread. While the rest of the palace enjoys wine and women, they are stuck babysitting. The captain storms in, ready to drag the young master out by force if necessary. But Ri-yun is already dressed to kill, shocking them with his sudden readiness. The news of his participation hits the rest of the team like a bolt of lightning. High fives are exchanged as they realize their boredom is finally at an end. Truno looks weary as he relays the order to keep this sudden change a secret. The guards agree instantly, too desperate for the banquet to care about protocol. Ri-yun watches them scramble, having manipulated their morale with ease. His seclusion wasn't fear, but a cover for intense physical conditioning. He gazes out at the sprawling city, his mind focused on the true objective. The banquet is merely the stage for a much darker purpose he holds inside. A carriage cuts through the cobblestone streets carrying the weight of destiny. The moment he has waited for across 2 lifetimes is finally approaching. A pale, arrogant noble with white hair prepares to make his entrance. Ryun's eyes burn with violent rage as he identifies Sense Peyton, his tormentor. The sun sets over the capital, casting long shadows across the architectural marvels of the royal city. Inside the banquet hall, a hush falls over the crowd as the herald announces a significant arrival. The heavy doors groan open, revealing the man who haunts Ryun's darkest nightmares. Sense Peyton strides in, flanked by his personal guard and wearing arrogance like a second skin. His smirk suggests he believes he already owns the room and everyone in it. Truno stiffens, recognizing the predator who has come to pick at the bones of the Sermon family. Sense spots the steward and descends upon him, his voice dripping with a sickly sweet condescension. He loudly wonders why the Sermon heir is hiding, ensuring the entire room hears the veiled insult. His eyes gleam with malice, clearly enjoying the opportunity to kick a rival while they are down. Truno sweats under the pressure, struggling to maintain his dignity against such blatant disrespect. Sense leans in closer, feigning confusion about the famous young master he has heard so much about. He brings up the rumors of the Omen of Doom, twisting the knife in the family's already bleeding reputation. The steward trembles with suppressed rage as Sense lists the fabricated crimes of a child. The crowd whispers about Sense's own magical genius, comparing his success to the Sermine's supposed failure. The atmosphere turns toxic as the Peyton heir openly mocks the host family on their own home turf. Sense laughs it off, pretending to be the bigger man who doesn't believe such silly gossip about his peers. Truno is about to lose his composure completely when a sudden announcement cuts through the tension. The main doors swing open once more, bathed in a blinding, almost theatrical light. Ryun steps into the hall not as a recluse, but as a vision of absolute nobility. Truno's jaw hits the floor, unable to reconcile this dashing figure with the lazy boy from the carriage. The Omen of Doom literally sparkles, radiating a charisma that blinds the judgmental onlookers. He stands tall in his formal attire, looking every inch the powerful aristocrat he was born to be. A confident smile plays on his lips, shattering the rumors of his incompetence in a single second. The crowd's disdain instantly morphs into admiration, with hearts fluttering across the room. Sense freezes, his spotlight stolen by the very victim he was just mocking a moment ago. The villain grinds his teeth, furious that the Sermon name is once again the center of attention. Ryun walks past him, delivering a deliberate, heavy shoulder check that nearly knocks Sense over. The young master stops and turns, greeting his future torturer with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. The room holds its breath, sensing the dangerous electric current passing between the two heirs. Ryun speaks loudly, praising Sense's kindness with a sarcasm so sharp it could draw blood. Ryun loudly brings up Sense's short-lived and infamous time at the academy, feigning innocence about the details. Sense's arrogant mask cracks as he realizes the conversation is heading into dangerous, humiliating territory. Ryun sarcastically recounts a tale of Sense rescuing a fellow student by emptying his pockets. He twists the narrative further, describing Sense's predation on a female student as a heroic act of chivalry. The villain's composure shatters as Ryun pretends to search his memory for one specific, damning detail. A cruel glint enters the young master's eye as he prepares to drop the keyword that will destroy Sense's pride. Truno tries desperately to intervene, but Ryun loudly recalls a story about young Lord Raz and his knee pain. The steward physically drags him away, terrified that Ryun is about to start a war right there in the hall. But as they pass, Ryun leans in to deliver a whisper that cuts deeper than any blade. He is hauled off like a troublemaker, but the damage has already been spectacularly done. Once out of sight, his expression shifts from playful to purely predatory, the mask falling away. Left behind, Sense trembles with a rage that threatens to boil his blood right out of his veins. He can't believe that a supposedly crippled boy just dared to threaten him in his own domain. Ryun walks away satisfied, knowing that an angry enemy is a prone-to-mistakes enemy. He stifles a laugh, delighted that the seed of uncontrollable fury has been successfully planted. The scene shifts to the quiet exterior of the guest quarters, masking the turmoil brewing inside. Inside, the silence is shattered by the sound of expensive porcelain meeting a violent end. Sense storms through his room, his humiliation fueling a destructive tantrum against the furniture. The memory of Ryun's whisper replays in his mind, specifically the mention of his powerful brother, Ras. It forces him to recall the shameful truth of his expulsion that his family tried so hard to bury. The knee pain comment wasn't about medicine. It was a code for a specific humiliating event. It refers to the moment his pride was completely broken, a secret he thought was safe from the world. The mere memory causes the arrogant noble to break out in a cold, trembling sweat. In the past, his own brother Raz had caught him tormenting a student and intervened with terrifying force. Sense had tried to play the victim, claiming ignorance of the girl's relationship to his powerful brother. But Raz didn't care about status, only the disgusting abuse of power his brother displayed. The threat was absolute. Apologize on your knees or die by your own brother's hand. Faced with true power, the bully had crumbled into a pathetic, weeping mess. He was forced to kneel in the dirt, a disgrace that scarred his fragile ego forever. Back in the present, the resurrected memory drives him into a frenzy of impotent rage. Sense paces in the shadows, realizing he must silence the boy who knows the dark secret of his brother Ras. He covers his face in a manic sweat, comforting himself with the thought that Ri-Yun is already a dead man walking. A sharp knock interrupts his spiraling thoughts, signaling a late-night visitor at his door. The heavy doors creak open, allowing a sliver of light to pierce the gloom of his quarters. Truno Hilda steps into the lion's den, his face hidden in shadow as he approaches the enemy. Sense turns with a predatory grin, surprised to see such a high-ranking servant sneaking around in the dark. The steward stands firm, his expression grim and unreadable as he faces the man destroying his house. High above the mountains, the moon watches silently over a carriage fleeing the capital city. The sermon procession moves swiftly through the night, putting miles between them and the chaotic banquet. Inside the carriage, Ri-Yun relaxes, satisfied that every piece of his performance landed perfectly. He has successfully rebranded himself from a scoundrel to a tragic, intelligent victim in the eyes of the public. Even the arrogant Sense Peyton swallowed the bait hook, line, and sinker, just as planned. Truno breaks the silence, praising the young master for his unexpected brilliance at the party. The old steward admits that for the first time in years, he sees a spark of hope for their crumbling house. Ri-Yun cuts him off with a question, asking if picking a fight with the Peyton heir was truly wise. But Truno smiles, confessing that seeing the family's pride restored was worth the risk of conflict. The young master's gaze sharpens, shifting from casual conversation to something far more dangerous. With a snap of his fingers, he activates a magical privacy barrier, sealing them off from the outside world. Truno flinches, startled by the sudden display of high-level magic from a boy who is supposed to be powerless. The atmosphere in the carriage drops to freezing as Ri-Yun drops his mask entirely. The steward stammers, confused as to why they need soundproofing in a moving carriage. Ri-Yun throws the steward's own words back at him, dissecting the hope he just mentioned. His eyes glow with a terrifying red light as he prepares to expose the lie sitting across from him. He states calmly that a truly hopeful servant wouldn't have chosen to betray the Sermine family. Truno freezes, the color draining from his face as his deepest, darkest secret is laid bare. He tries to feign ignorance, but the young master's gaze pins him to the seat like a butterfly. Ri-Yun declares that treason is a stain that is usually great and unforgivable. The carriage rattles on, a tiny box containing a conversation that will decide a man's life. But then Ri-Yun smiles, offering a twisted form of mercy because the betrayal was done to save the family. Truno collapses in shock, unable to comprehend how a child knows the impossible truth of his situation. Truno's heart hammers against his ribs as the accusation hangs heavy in the air. Ri-Yun sits like a king on a throne of secrets, watching the old man squirm. The steward stares at the boy he raised, realizing he is looking at a complete stranger. The young master's eyes hold the cold, hard wisdom of a life already lived. Truno buries his face in his hands, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of the moment. But instead of fear, a twisted, tearful joy erupts from the trader's soul. Ri-Yun watches the breakdown with the satisfaction of a gambler holding all the aces. He casually points out their location, shifting the conversation from treason to logistics. Truno is baffled by the boy's calm demeanor as they head straight into a death trap. He realizes that the expression on Ri-Yun's face isn't happiness, but something far darker. It is the cold, predatory look of a hunter who has already spotted his prey. The carriage lurches to a violent halt, signaling the beginning of the end. Confusion spreads among the guards as the convoy freezes in the middle of nowhere. A sharp sound cuts through the night, alerting the knights to immediate danger. The driver collapses at the reins, foam and blood spilling from his lips. A bolt of purple energy screams out of the darkness, aiming for a lethal strike. Chaos erupts as the escort knights scramble to defend against the sudden ambush. A rain of mana-infused arrows descends from the moonlight, seeking Sermon blood. Defensive spells flare to life, creating a golden dome against the deadly downpour. The loyal guards roar in defiance, cutting down projectiles with practiced skill. The magical shield groans under the relentless assault of the hidden attackers. The captain issues a ruthless order, trusting no one in the chaos of the night. But inside the protected vehicle, the situation is far stranger than the battle outside. Panic sets in as the guards realize their VIP has vanished into thin air. The empty seat mocks them, turning a defensive battle into a frantic search mission. Confusion reigns as the knights scan the tree line for their missing charge. Deep in the forest, a shadow moves with a speed that defies the laws of nature. A hooded rider tears through the underbrush, desperate to escape the kill zone. Truno pushes his mount to the limit, his breath coming in ragged, terrified gasps. But he is not alone, for a predator has hitched a ride on his very back. The trap springs successfully, suspending the young master in a magical web of sensory deprivation and physical weakness. Ri-Yun hangs upside down, feigning helplessness while his mind coolly tracks the duration of the status effects. Outside the carriage, the loyal escort knights are thrown into absolute chaos, believing their charge has been snatched away. In the original timeline, this kidnapping was the financial black hole that drained the family's resources and sealed their doom. But this time, Ri-Yun intends to hijack the tragedy, using the crisis to manipulate the timeline to his advantage. Truno recalls the terrifying conversation they had just moments ago, where the boy outlined this staged downfall. Ri-Yun had explained that trying to rebuild the family openly would only invite faster destruction from their enemies. The other great houses are like sharks in bloody water, waiting for any sign of strength to trigger a feeding frenzy. That is why he played the fool for months, convincing the world that the Sermine bloodline was a dead end. He knows the Peyton family doesn't just want to defeat them, they want to trample the Sermine name into the dirt. A wicked glint enters his eye as he plans to use their own arrogance and aggression as a weapon against them. He predicted that Sense would try something drastic on the return trip, providing the perfect stage for their play. But for the trap to work, they needed a traitor on the inside to open the gates and sell the lie. A subtle, dangerous smile had graced his lips as he offered the steward a chance at redemption. He gave the old man a binary choice: die as a traitor or become a double agent for the family's resurrection. Truno had to commit fully to the role, orchestrating the fake downfall to fool the enemy completely. Back in the present, the system notifies him that his mana is actively fighting off the magical restraints. The Blue Earth technique hums beneath his skin, turning the hostile magic into fuel rather than a prison. While his body hangs limp, his mind remains sharp, confirming that everything is proceeding exactly as calculated. A whisper of apology cuts through the darkness, signaling the next phase of the operation is underway. Truno carries the unconscious boy through the woods, his body trembling with the weight of his guilt and fear. Ri-Yun opens one glowing eye, silently commanding his servant to stick to the script and stop shaking. Tears stream down the steward's face, knowing this deception is the only path to forgiveness for his past sins. Even while playing the victim, Ri-Yun's internal system continues to farm stats from the magical pressure. A satisfying chime announces that his endurance has pushed all his stats to a new threshold of power. He has completed the first growth condition, turning a kidnapping into a highly efficient power-leveling session. They arrive at a secluded meeting point, where a stone structure looms silently under the pale moonlight. Sense Peyton steps out of the shadows, flanked by his minions, looking pleased with his captured prize. The villain sneers, surprised that the head steward actually had the guts to deliver the young master personally. He holds up a scroll, the payment for a betrayal that is actually a trap waiting to be sprung. Sense demands confirmation on the intel, staring down a hooded messenger from the shadows. The seal proves its authenticity, bearing the mark of the Asan family, the continent's most reliable information brokers. The scroll contains the Holy Grail for the Sermon loyalists, the location of the missing direct bloodline. This was the leverage used to break Truno, convincing him to trade his useless young master for the family's true hope. In the steward's desperate mind, sacrificing the incompetent Ri-Yun was the only way to restore the house's glory. Sense gloats that the impoverished Sermine estate could never have outbid his family's deep pockets for such a prize. With the transaction complete, the villain dismisses the traitor like a used napkin. Truno pauses to remind the monster of their deal, his voice trembling with a mix of guilt and hope. Sense flashes a lying smile, promising that the precious young lord will be returned safely. The steward rides into the night, fleeing the scene of his crime while Sense watches him go. His minions offer to silence the loose end, but Sense decides to let the Sermon family handle the execution. He figures the traitor is a dead man walking the moment he returns to the estate empty-handed. Alone with his victim, Sense grabs a handful of hair, eager to vent his pent-up rage. The moon hangs high over the isolated hideout, the only witness to the brutality about to unfold. A pulse of magical energy flares, signaling the start of a very personal interrogation. Sense's eyes narrow with sadistic glee, savoring the total control he now holds over his rival. He gets right in the prisoner's face, asking if the reality of his situation has finally sunk in. Riyun stares back with an unsettling calmness, his green eye analyzing the threat level. The villain bursts into laughter, finding the sight of a chained noble to be the height of comedy. Riyun plays the confused victim perfectly, asking what exactly is happening here. He calmly asks if Sense understands the consequences, which only amuses the captor further. Sense leans in, mocking the boy's earlier confidence at the banquet with a cruel sneer. A dangerous light flickers in Riyun's eyes, hidden beneath the shadow of his bangs. The villain brings up the name Ras, clearly still stinging from the humiliation of the past. He screams that the Sermine protectors are dead and gone, leaving the boy utterly alone. A heavy boot crashes into Riyun's chest, punctuating the lesson on hierarchy. The impact sends shockwaves through his body, but the prisoner barely flinches. Sense gleefully reveals the betrayal, shouting that Truno sold him out for a piece of paper. But Riyun's eye glows with a spectral green light, absorbing the violence as mere data. Sense declares this kidnapping the start of a war, unaware he just handed his enemy the perfect excuse. Sense continues his arrogant monologue, calling the prisoner a moron for daring to speak back. A strange green aura begins to manifest around the villain, though he remains oblivious to the danger. Riyun's eye snaps open, the pupil contracting into a symbol of absolute magical control. The air hums with power as invisible gears of magic begin to turn beneath the floor. Green flames erupt from the boy's body, shattering the illusion of a helpless prisoner in an instant. He stands at the center of a complex formation, the chains now looking like mere decorations on a powerful mage. Sense shields his eyes, unable to comprehend the blinding radiance coming from his victim. The villain finds himself trapped within a cage of emerald light, his arrogance replaced by confusion. He stares into the abyss of mana, realizing too late that the hunter has become the prey. Riyun steps onto the air itself, using the floating magic circles as a staircase to dominance. Outside, the moon shines down on the tower, a silent witness to the sudden shift in power. The chains still bind his wrists, but the magical pressure in the room has clearly shifted sides. Sense attempts to retaliate, screaming in confusion as his own magic fails to answer his call. He frantically gestures, but the mana in the air refuses to obey his commands. Desperate denial sets in as he accuses the boy of using a cheap parlor trick to buy time. Riyun just smirks, throwing the villain's own insult back in his face with interest. His eye glows with predatory amusement, savoring the look of dawning horror on Sense's face. He reminds his captor that warnings were given, even if they were foolishly ignored. The crippled boy is gone, replaced by a mage of terrifying caliber staring down an insect. He decides to end the villain's monologue permanently with a simple observation about his big mouth. The air crackles with static as Riyun prepares to demonstrate what real power looks like. Sense suddenly gasps, invisible hands tightening around his throat to cut off his words. A complex seal burns into his skin, physically locking away his ability to speak. Panic sets in as he clutches his neck, realizing his voice has been magically stolen. The silent spell takes hold, stripping the mage of his ability to chant and cast high-level spells. Riyun mocks him, pointing out that a silent mage is nothing more than a sitting duck. Desperate, Sense tries to force out a spell without words, his hand glowing with unstable purple energy. He manages to summon a basic firebolt, the only scrap of magic left to him without a chant. But without words, his arsenal is reduced to weak sparks that barely qualify as an attack against Riyun. He fires the bolt in a blind panic, hoping to burn away the nightmare standing before him. The firebolt strikes, but a digital shield absorbs the impact with insulting ease. Riyun's system logs the resistance, treating the attack like a minor software bug. Enraged, Sense summons a massive sphere of flame, desperate to burn away his humiliation. Riyun sighs, noting that the villain has wasted his last chance to walk away with dignity. Blue magic circles flare as Sense prepares to unleash a third circle spell of destruction. He hurls the fireball with a scream, pouring all his malice into one final strike. But panic floods his eyes as the spell begins to unravel in midair. A disruption seal activates over Riyun's eye, dismantling the magic structure instantly. The flames vanish, and Riyun mocks him for trying to use brute force against a superior technician. Sense grits his teeth, his reality shattering as the cripple dominates him completely. Abandoning range, he conjures a mana blade and charges in for a desperate melee kill. Riyun watches the approach calmly, his blue eye tracking every clumsy movement. With a casual flick, Riyun blocks the strike, revealing that the chains were never really holding him. Blue energy surges as he shatters the iron bindings, declaring them as fragile as paper. He grins, warning Sense that the trap he stepped into has layers he hasn't even seen yet. Sense spins around, terrified to find a massive magical formation glowing right behind him. A bolt of paralysis magic slams into him, locking his body in a rigid cage of lightning. Riyun stands free and smiling, bathed in the blue light of his absolute victory. The villain crashes to the floor, his body twitching helplessly as the spell takes full effect. Riyun looms over him, deciding to let the prisoner sleep on his new reality for a while. The camera inverts, emphasizing that the world has turned upside down for the patent heir. Silence reclaims the dungeon, broken only by the dripping of water and the hum of magic. Sense's eye snaps open, groggy and disoriented in the cold darkness. A voice drips with sarcasm from the shadows, asking if the princess has finally woken up. Riyun sits comfortably, playing with a dagger and mocking the length of Sense's nap. Sense realizes with horror that he is now the one strung up like a piece of meat. He yanks at the chains, but the iron holds fast against his physical struggle. Hate burns in his eyes as he stares at the boy who dared to put him in this position. But then he realizes his voice works and the chains aren't magical, so he immediately tries to cast a wind spell. A hidden trap activates instantly, shocking him with green lightning before he can finish the first syllable. Riyun steps closer, mocking the idea that he would let himself be chained without a backup plan. He reveals a blade, explaining that he had already turned the dungeon into his own domain before arriving. Sense stares in confusion, his brain struggling to process the sudden shift in power dynamics. Steel meets flesh as Riyun carves his own brand of justice into the villain's skin. The pain is immediate and sharp, shattering the noble's arrogance into 1,000 pieces. Sense hangs suspended, his body now a canvas for a forbidden and agonizing blood ritual. Riyun cruelly reveals he cast an awakening spell to ensure his victim feels every second of the torment. He channels the rage of a child who was once carved up by this very man in a different life. Sense stammers through the pain, demanding to know where a 12-year-old learned such dark arts. Riyun smiles, his secret knowledge of a past life burning bright behind his eyes. His mind drifts back 3 months, to the moment he first reclaimed his magical potential. While the household panicked over his disappearances, he was busy mastering the art of being unseen. Unlocking high-level abilities was child's play, thanks to the system interface only he can see. He utilized the hidden knowledge of mana circuits, a concept completely unknown to this era's mages. Only a master player from the future would understand the intricate blueprints of magical power. He bypassed years of tedious study and repetitive training by simply injecting mana directly into the circuits. It's essentially the magical equivalent of downloading a kung fu manual directly into his brain. Under the cover of stealth, he slipped out of the estate right under the noses of his guards. He traveled to this specific dungeon, a place etched into his memory by years of future torture. Back in the present, Sense screams as the trap designed for Riyun is turned against him. The irony is delicious. The pain amplification circle Sense prepared is now cooking his own nerves. Agonizing screams echo from the tower, painting the sunset with the sounds of retribution. The once proud noble is reduced to a weeping mess, begging for a mercy he never showed others. But his pleas fall on deaf ears as the blood magic continues its ruthless work on his body. Riyun pauses, toying with the idea of ending the session before his guest breaks completely. Sense sobs in relief, pathetic gratitude spilling from his lips at the mere pause of pain. But the relief is short-lived as Riyun turns his back, offering a cruel ultimatum instead of freedom. Sense warns the boy to run, claiming his powerful family will arrive any second to slaughter him. Riyun leans in with a smirk, revealing he knows exactly when the cavalry is actually scheduled to arrive. The villain freezes, terrified that his enemy knows the rescue timeline better than he does. The Peyton family's elite execution squad, the Fingers, finally emerges from the shadows. Sense screams with bloody delight, believing his salvation has arrived to butcher his captor. Riyun silences the celebration with a brutal kick, reminding the villain who is currently in charge. The curse brand on Sense's chest pulses violently, reacting to the sudden spike in emotion. Riyun looms over him, promising that the arrival of guests only makes the game more interesting. The villain howls in renewed agony as the torture spell tightens its grip on his soul. With a casual stride, Riyun turns his back on the prisoner to prepare a proper welcome. He knows that the approaching enemies are elite killers, far more dangerous than the fool in chains. One wrong move against the fingers of Peyton will result in instant death, so perfection is mandatory. 1 week passes in silence before the sun sets on the day of reckoning. The elite squad gathers at the entrance, cloaked in darkness and suspicion. They are puzzled by the lack of communication, unaware their young master has been screaming for days. The squad leader questions his men, disturbed by the complete radio silence from the facility. His subordinates confirm that the perimeter is secure and no one has entered or left. They assume Sense is simply too absorbed in torturing the hostage to bother checking in. A mage prepares his staff, recalling the strict order to retrieve the Sermine heir alive. He steps forward to breach the door, sensing that something is wrong behind the stone walls. The leader's eyes glow with resolve, prioritizing the family head's mission over Sense's ego. Purple mana explodes outward, blasting the heavy doors off their hinges in a shower of debris. But the commander halts his team, deciding to enter the lion's den alone. He dismisses his subordinates, sensing a trap that would only slaughter the weaker members. The leader descends into the spiraling darkness, his cape trailing behind him like a shroud. His footsteps echo rhythmically against the cold stone, announcing his arrival to the void. He pauses, unsettled by an ominous pressure that exists despite the total absence of mana. Suddenly, the darkness lights up as countless turquoise magic circles flare to life on the walls. The intruder reacts instantly, realizing he has walked straight into a pre-laid kill zone. A shimmering barrier springs up just in time to deflect a barrage of magical projectiles. He realizes with horror that Sense isn't having fun. He has likely been neutralized completely. The stairs are rigged with a complex network of automated traps waiting for a victim. He recognizes the work of a skilled tactician who knows every inch of this dungeon's architecture. The squad leader, Ike, navigates the spiraling descent, noting that the entire passage is paved with lethal traps. He activates a double barrier, deflecting a storm of magical projectiles while wondering if this is the Sermon family's doing. His patience wears thin as he realizes he doesn't have the luxury of disarming these mechanisms one by one. With a furious glare, he vows that whoever is playing these games will regret challenging the fingers of Peyton. He reaches the bottom, finding an open cell bathed in an ominous, flickering light. Fresh blood stains the stone floor, painting a grim picture of recent violence. Inside, he finds a figure strung up in chains, battered and bleeding heavily from countless wounds. The prisoner hangs limp, surrounded by a chaotic swirl of purple energy and broken shackles. Ike rushes forward, his voice echoing in the chamber as he identifies the victim. He reaches out to the fallen boy, who seems to recognize him through the haze of pain. The victim's face is a mask of agony, barely recognizable through the blood and bruising. Ike inspects the magical seal branded on the boy's arm, instantly recognizing the mana signature of his master, Sense Peyton. He assumes Sense successfully captured and tortured the Sermine heir before leaving him here. He decides that stabilizing the prize is the priority and prepares to administer aid before escaping. His instincts scream danger, noting that the enemy who set the hallway traps still hasn't revealed themselves. He deduces that Sense must have subdued the boy, but was forced to leave him behind as bait. Looking at the unconscious captive, Ike realizes that touching this bait might trigger the real trap. But he cannot abandon his mission to retrieve the Sermon bloodline, so he steels his resolve. The prisoner suddenly curses Ryun Sermine, a strange thing for the boy to say about himself. Ignoring the oddity, Ike prepares a powerful spell to ensure the boy cannot be moved by anyone else. He begins the chant for a 7th circle complete binding, intending to strip away the victim's will entirely. But just as the mana gathers, the prisoner flips upside down, revealing a healthy, smiling Ryun hovering above him. The boy mocks the mage's excessive caution, his eyes glowing with mischievous green energy. Panic overrides logic, and Ike instinctively cancels his complex spell to launch a desperate fireball. The explosion rocks the small cell, filling the space with smoke and chaotic magical discharge. Ike stumbles back, realizing too late that he has been fighting illusions rather than flesh and blood. He coughs up a spray of blood, his internal organs ravaged by the backlash of canceling a 7th circle spell mid-chant. The mana flow reverses violently, punishing him for his hesitation just as Ryun planned. Dozens of green spectral Ryuns appear, taunting him for focusing on the bait instead of the hunter. Enraged and humiliated, Ike raises his staff to purge the room of these mocking phantoms. The dungeon erupts into chaos as illusions swarm the confused mage from all sides. Ryun moves like a phantom, his speed enhanced by the dungeon's mana density. He dances through the air, a dagger gleaming with lethal green intent. Green and purple eyes lock in a deadly contest of wills and reflexes. Ike swings his staff with crushing force, but hits only empty air and shadows. The squad leader sneers, calling the boy arrogant for relying on cheap parlor tricks. He lands a devastating blow, smashing what appears to be the boy's physical body. The figure is launched backward, crashing violently against the cold stone floor. Taking no chances, Ike unleashes a point-blank explosion to incinerate the threat completely. He stands over the motionless form, convinced the young master's luck has finally run out. But a glint of metal on the floor catches his eye, pausing his victory lap. A dagger lies near his boot, humming with a strange, delayed magical charge. Realization strikes him like a lightning bolt. The attack was never meant to hit. A blade erupts from his throat, spraying blood across the dungeon walls. The assassin strikes from behind, wearing a face that freezes Ike's blood cold. Ike stares in horror, realizing his own master's hands are holding the knife. Ri-Yun smiles through Sense's face, revealing the terrifying truth of his blood magic. The ritual carved into the skin wasn't just for torture, but for soul transfer. He reveals that his real body on the floor currently houses Sense's trapped soul. Despite the fatal wound, Ike tries to detonate his mana core in a suicide pact. A massive explosion engulfs the room, threatening to bury them all in rubble. Debris rains down as the smoke clears, revealing the outcome of the desperate gambit. The dust settles, but the dungeon remains standing, contained by Ri-Yun's barriers. A fragment of the squad leader's mask clatters onto the stone floor. It spins to a halt, symbolizing the complete destruction of the Titan elite. Ike lies broken and defeated, staring up at the monster wearing his master's skin. Ri-Yun stands tall in his stolen body, the green eye marking his dominance. A predatory grin spreads across Sense's face, fueled by Ri-Yun's victorious soul. He crouches down, not to finish the kill but to deliver a final message. He produces a potion, deciding that death is too easy an escape for them. Ri-Yun douses himself in a healing potion, washing away the blood of a battle that shouldn't have been possible. The system acknowledges his suffering, generating a resistance skill born from pure agony. The skill ranks up immediately, a testament to the brutal pain he just endured to secure victory. He grits his teeth, realizing he needs a specific, visible scar to sell his story to the world. He endures the self-inflicted torment, knowing that a perfect lie requires a touch of real blood. With the stage set, he celebrates the impossible feat of a novice hunting down a grand mage. The system confirms his victory, treating the death of an elite like a massive jackpot. A golden notification flashes, signaling the completion of his hidden objective. The rewards begin to cascade, pushing his growth speed beyond any logical limit. He stares at the results, realizing the system has been incredibly generous with the experience points. His level has skyrocketed from a lowly 2 to a respectable 15 in a single heartbeat. He marvels at the numbers, having skipped months of grinding in just one night. He wonders if the hidden quest multipliers are responsible for this absurd bounty of power. But he pushes the math aside, prioritizing a time-sensitive ritual over celebration. A complex magical formation hums to life on the dungeon floor, hungry for a sacrifice. He drags the corpse of the elite mage toward the center of the circle to serve as fuel. A thick trail of blood marks the final journey of the Patton family's enforcer. The dead mage becomes a crucial component in a grand design to reshape Ri-Yun's future. He relies on the absolute truth that magic is carved into the soul, not the meat suit he is wearing. Since his soul is intact, his magical circuits remain fully operational even in this stolen body. He confirms that he can wield his own mana signature despite wearing his enemy's skin. He begins the transfer, pouring his own life force into the ritual to catalyze the reaction. The cost is steep, draining the levels he just earned to power the forbidden spell. The system deducts his hard-won progress as payment for the dark art he is performing. But the sacrifice triggers a hidden condition within the system, unlocking a new potential. A rare opportunity manifests, revealing a path usually closed to mere mortals. The Shadow class appears, a legendary designation for those who strike from the dark. He secures the first class, but realizes he has enough fuel to be greedy. The storm outside mirrors the ambitious tempest raging in his mind as he pushes for more. He decides to gamble everything on a triple advancement while the iron is hot. He aims for the ultimate class, a legendary tier that once crowned him the strongest entity in the realm. To unlock the advanced ghost tier, he needs a soul vast enough to contain the synergy of a necromancer and an assassin. The risk is catastrophic. A single misstep in the ritual could shatter his mind into irreparable dust. But the reward is absolute control over his destiny, a gamble he is more than willing to take. He initiates the synchronization, aligning his stolen body with the spiritual blueprint of his original form. The system demands a heavy tax, stripping away 5 hard-earned levels in a single painful instant. Magical lightning crackles around his vision as the cost of forbidden power is extracted from his core. A warning flashes red, alerting him that his very soul is fracturing under the immense strain. He floats in the center of the storm, his body acting as a fragile conduit for volatile energies. The agony is absolute, feeling as though every fiber of his being is being shredded by invisible claws. Blood tears stream down his face as he wonders if his greed has finally outpaced his endurance. His consciousness flickers violently between his original form and the stolen vessel he now inhabits. Memories of his past torture resurface, the pain of the ritual mirroring the hell of the laboratory. He recalls the face of the man who broke him, using that burning hatred as fuel to keep going. The image of his fallen commander, bleeding and broken, strengthens his resolve to see this through. He remembers the shield that protected him until the bitter end, refusing to let that sacrifice be in vain. The memory of Sena burning her own life force to save him cuts through the physical agony. Her final, defiant smile in the face of death reminds him that pain is temporary, but failure is forever. He clamps his jaw shut, grinding his teeth as he forces his body to accept the overwhelming power. With a roar that shakes the dungeon, he offers up his soul to claim the forbidden ghost class. A blinding pillar of purple light erupts, signaling the climax of the dangerous transformation. The chaotic energy begins to settle, weaving itself into a new, stable form within the darkness. From the maelstrom of mana, a golden card manifests to confirm his survival and success. The system acknowledges his spiritual capacity, unlocking the door to a hidden potential few have ever seen. He stares at the glowing interface, desperate for the specific outcome he gambled everything on. The lock shatters, granting him the prestigious and terrifying title of Phantom. The avatar of the Phantom rises, a spectral entity that bridges the gap between the living and the dead. He breathes the name of his new class, feeling the ancient power settle deep into his bones. It is a power unseen in this era, a secret weapon that belongs solely to him and his system. He wipes the blood from his face, satisfied that he has successfully robbed fate blind. He stands over the corpse of the elite mage, ready to execute the final phase of his plan. The passive ability of his new ghost class begins to interact with the lingering mana of the dead. Killing a 7th Circle Grand Mage wasn't just self-defense, it was a necessary shopping trip for high-end materials. He pours his energy into the vessel, hoping the dead elite can withstand the pressure of resurrection. If this ritual succeeds, he can shave years off his vengeance timeline and jump straight to the endgame. He attempts to fabricate a lich, bypassing the usual level 70 requirement by using superior raw ingredients. Blinding light erupts from the corpse's eyes as the boundary between life and death is violently torn open. But the system rejects the ambitious attempt, pivoting instantly to a special backup protocol instead. Ryun's eyes widen in shock as the magic takes a turn he didn't quite anticipate. From the shadows of the ritual, a dark feminine silhouette begins to manifest behind him. The darkness coalesces into a form that defies the standard laws of necromancy, taking on a life of its own. A majestic, armored spirit emerges from the void, radiating an aura of absolute lethal grace. The ritual stabilizes, birthing a unique undead entity that hovers silently over its new master. A chilling smile plays across the spirit's face, eager to serve the one who called it forth from the abyss. The system prompts him to bestow a name upon this new, terrifying weapon he has forged. He stares up at his creation, realizing he has summoned something far greater than a simple servant. The success notification hangs in the air, confirming that his gamble has paid off in spades. Its presence fills the dungeon with a cold, predatory intent that matches his own dark ambitions. The naming prompt pulses, waiting for him to define the identity of his new shadow. Suddenly, a massive pillar of light pierces the night sky, announcing to the world that something major has occurred. The explosion of energy catches the attention of the remaining patent guards waiting nervously outside. Confusion ripples through the ranks as they witness the aftermath of a battle they weren't invited to. Panic sets in as they realize their young master is missing, amidst the smoking ruins of the tower. Footsteps echo from the dust cloud, silencing their frantic questions with a heavy, rhythmic thud. Ryun emerges from the chaos wearing Sense's skin, carrying his own original body in his arms. His face is a mask of exhaustion and calculated damage, selling the story of a desperate struggle. The subordinate tries to make sense of the scene, blaming the missing squad leader for the destruction. Ryun screams a fabrication, pinning the blame on the dead man to cover his tracks with a perfect lie. He claims to have barely subdued the prisoner, ordering them to prepare for an immediate departure. With a command to hold the line against a non-existent threat, he prepares to ride off with his victory secured. The aftermath of the explosion leaves the dungeon entrance in absolute chaos. Under the cover of darkness, a lone rider vanishes into the deep forest. It marks the moment the world lost track of the sermon heir completely. News travels fast to the main encampment of the Payton forces. A scout delivers the grim report to a high-ranking commander with fiery red hair. The commander listens intently as he learns that Ike and his squad have been wiped out. A dangerous smile plays on his lips, though the news is objectively terrible. He crushes the report in his hand, his frustration manifesting physically. The commander realizes the gravity of the situation if this failure becomes public knowledge. He asks the trembling scout if anyone else is aware of what happened tonight. The scout hesitates, unaware that a silent executioner stands right behind him. The armored figure's helmet glows with a lethal red light, awaiting the order. A single slash silences the witness forever, tying up the loose end in blood. The commander turns away, unbothered by the corpse cooling on his floor. He knows that if the kidnapping plot is exposed, the Payton family faces a political nightmare. A sudden shout from outside interrupts his strategic planning. He turns his gaze toward the entrance, annoyed by the disturbance. A brave sermon soldier stands his ground, warning the invaders to back off. The guard draws his sword, ready to die for his territory despite the odds. But the real threat arrives as a massive figure in blue armor steps forward. Alejandro exhales a cloud of steam, his presence alone changing the air pressure. The Knight Commander challenges the enemy with a terrifying, quiet rage. His composure snaps, and he screams a death threat at the rival forces. He accuses the Payton commander of trespassing and inciting an act of war. With a furious point of his finger, he demands they produce Riyun immediately. The red-haired commander deflects, bringing up the suspicious fire at the border. He tries to shift the focus to the destroyed dungeon facility nearby. Alejandro isn't buying the act, accusing them of camping there to destroy evidence. The Payton leader feigns ignorance, claiming he has no idea where the boy is. He adds a layer of deception, stating that his own nephew's sense is also missing. The Payton commander freezes in a cold sweat, the accusation of treachery hanging heavy in the air. Sena interrupts the standoff with a wave of fire, warning that only the young lord's orders are keeping him alive. She commands absolute silence, making it clear that finding Riyun is the only topic up for discussion. Deep in the forest, Truno searches desperately, praying the young master's clue wasn't a lie. He questions the location, noting that if the trail were obvious, the Payton forces would have found it already. Sena activates her magic, tuning into the unique frequency of the Sermine family's secret technique. She trusts that the resonance of the Blue Earth art will act as a lighthouse in the dark. A spectral vision of Riyun appears behind her, guiding her senses through the magical noise. A pulse of green energy flares in the distance, confirming that the signal is active and waiting. Her eyes snap open as she locks onto the target, declaring that the search is over. They approach a massive tree glowing with mana, but the sight that awaits them is grim. Truno gasps in horror, his face twisting in anguish as the reality of the scene hits him. A pair of bare feet dangle in the air, suspended by ropes and swirling green energy. It is Riyun's original body, strung up and abandoned in the cold forest night. The scene is a gruesome tableau, deliberately staged to look like the work of a madman. The body is battered and lifeless, a discarded vessel left behind by a soul on the move. Blood-red writing on the cloth screams Sense Payton's name, framing the villain perfectly for the crime. But beneath the horror lies a letter, sealed and waiting for the right eyes to find it. Sena spots the correspondence, realizing this is a message rather than just a corpse. Truno is too distraught to notice until she points out the final piece of the puzzle. In a flashback, Riyun predicts this exact moment, knowing Sena would be the one to find him. He explains that infiltrating the Payton family in a stolen body is too dangerous right now. Their leader is an 8th Circle mage who would spot the soul transfer instantly and destroy him. Sena reads on, learning that returning to the Sermon family is also off the table. If he returns alive, the Payton family would launch a full-scale war to cover their crimes. The current Sermine estate is too weak to survive such a conflict, so he must remain dead. He chooses a third option, deciding to vanish into the shadows to build his strength alone. He leaves behind a carefully crafted lie to protect his allies while he operates in the dark. Sena ignites the letter, destroying the evidence and accepting her role in the deception. She orders the steward to return home, knowing the real work of rebuilding the family starts now. Rapid footsteps slap against the cobblestones as a figure sprints through the morning light. Birds scatter into the golden sky, startled by the energetic runner cutting through the town. A burly shopkeeper waves him down, calling out to Leon with a friendly, familiar grin. Sena's masked face flashes in memory, confident that her young master will thrive in the shadows. The boy turns with a bright smile, fully embracing the new identity of Leon. But a close-up reveals the sharp green eye of Ri-Yun, hidden beneath the facade. The narration confirms that this unassuming commoner is actually the Dragon of Drea in disguise. 3 months have slipped by since the sermon heir vanished from the world. The story relocates to the capital of the Peyton Feinstroy Kingdom, deep in enemy territory. Locals gossip about the tense standoff between the Peyton and Sermon families that nearly sparked a war. They mention that the kingdoms had to intervene to stop the bloodshed before it began. The official story is that a traitor kidnapped the Sermine heir, leaving the family broken. Leon jogs past the chatter, his expression unbothered by the twisted version of the truth. The citizens scoff that the Sermon family accepted money to shut up about the incident. They mock the fallen house for taking a payout instead of finding their lost son. An apple is tossed in the air as they lament the disappearance of the legendary family head. Leon catches the fruit mid-air, ignoring the insults directed at his family name. He weaves through the crowd, leaving the public opinion behind to focus on his mission. A purple banner marked with a raven hangs quietly in a back alley. It marks the local branch of the Martong Assassination Guild, a dangerous place for a kid. Inside, a woman with fiery red hair listens to reports with palpable boredom. She rests her chin on her hand, unimpressed by the mundane intelligence flowing in. Sapphire, the branch leader, dismisses the updates as completely uninteresting. Her subordinate tries to impress her, but she claims to know all of it already. She shifts the topic to the execution of Truno, the Sermine family's chief steward. A beer mug sits on the table, grounding the conversation in a casual, gritty reality. The bearded man confirms that Truno was beheaded for his role in the kidnapping plot. He adds that Alejandro, the swordmaster, performed the execution personally on the spot. Sapphire looks visibly shaken, realizing the Sermon family is cleaning house with ruthless efficiency. The heavy wooden door creaks open, slicing through the tense atmosphere. Sapphire slides a sealed envelope across the table, announcing that only one final test remains. She rests her hand on the letter, suspecting that this formality is already beneath his skill level. Standing beneath the guild banners, she marvels that he reached the final stage in a record-breaking 2 months. Leon's green eyes sharpen, focused entirely on the objective rather than the praise. She declares him a prodigy, the youngest official member to grace the guild in 100 years. Leon plays the humble student, claiming he is still miles behind the branch leader's expertise. Sapphire sips her tea, noting that his cold, dead expression has thawed slightly since their first meeting. Her mind drifts back 2 months, to the stormy night that started it all. Rain lashed against the cobblestones of a quiet, unassuming street outside the guild. The heavy door creaked open, admitting a visitor seeking shelter from the storm. A small, drenched figure stood in the entrance, looking more like a beggar than a client. But Sapphire's eyes widened as the beggar slammed a massive bag of gold onto the table. Under the hood, a pair of intense eyes burned with a request that defied all logic. She was left speechless, trying to process the sheer audacity of the child standing before her. Back in the present, Leon smiles, knowing exactly the impression he made that night. Sapphire admits that once she saw the gold, her professional instincts kicked in immediately. She grins, confessing that she knew right away she wouldn't meet another client like him. It isn't every day a kid walks in with a fortune and puts a hit out on his own life. The absurdity of requesting his own assassination was the hook that got him through the door. Leon stares at the wax seal, the symbol of his final hurdle to official status. He takes the letter and stands, preferring to review the mission details in private. With a casual wave, he asks her to prepare the test while he handles the paperwork. Sapphire agrees, watching her star pupil walk away with a mix of pride and curiosity. The door clicks shut, leaving the branch leader alone with her thoughts. The silence of the room feels heavier now that the prodigy has left. Purple smoke begins to coalesce behind her, forming a sinister, shadowy silhouette. A spectral entity manifests, questioning if her intuition was the real reason she recruited the boy. Leon walks down the corridor, unaware that his performance is being dissected by ghosts. Sapphire turns to her spectral partner, Cal, asking if his background check yielded any results. The spirit reports a clean, fabricated history, an orphan who put a hit on himself just to prove he belonged. The spectral partner confirms that the background check on Leon came back spotless, with every detail verified. With a tip of his hat, Cal assures the guild leader that the boy's history is as solid as the ground they stand on. He even went the extra mile, visiting the remote location where Leon supposedly trained with his master. The investigation found a house in the woods with clear traces of recent habitation, perfectly matching the fabrication. Sapphire hesitates, admitting that while the evidence is perfect, her gut is screaming that something is off. She voices the dangerous suspicion that has been nagging her. Could this prodigy actually be the missing Reencarnated? Cal pauses, his glowing eyes narrowing as he processes the absurdity of her question. The name of the vanished young lord hangs in the air, a ghost story that the entire kingdom is whispering about. Sapphire points out the strange coincidence of a mysterious, talented boy appearing exactly when the sermon air disappeared. She admits it bothers her, unable to shake the feeling that the timing is too perfect to be an accident. But Cal shuts down the theory immediately, stating that the probability of them being the same person is effectively zero. Sapphire demands a reason, needing more than just his dismissal to kill her lingering suspicion. Cal reminds her that Ri-Yun was infamous for being a total failure in mana, swordsmanship, and stamina. He was known as the Omen of Doom, a fragile, talentless boy who couldn't hurt a fly, let alone pass their entrance exam. Sapphire sighs, conceding that a useless noble couldn't possibly be the genius assassin standing in her guild. She rips up the investigation report, deciding to trust the reality of Leon's skill over a wild, paranoid hunch. She dismisses Cal, telling him she won't waste his high-level talents on such pointless background checks anymore. Meanwhile, safely in his room, Ri-Yun sits on his bed while a green spectral trail drifts through the air. He muses that Sapphire is now interested in his fictional master, assuming anyone who raised him must be extraordinary. A sharp glint in his eye reveals his annoyance at Sapphire's terrifyingly accurate instincts. He shifts his focus to the green spirit, praising the sheer convenience of his necromancer abilities. He explains that as long as souls are present, he can hijack their senses to spy on conversations anywhere. A flashback reveals a ghost chilling right behind Sapphire, feeding every word of her private meeting back to him. With the coast clear, he summons his status window to check the fruits of his deception. The interface confirms his identity as Ri-Yun Sermine, listing his active Hand of Death class and impressive stats. He notes with satisfaction that the levels he sacrificed for his class advancement have already returned. The mana he poured into the body domination technique has paid off, granting him a perfect, unbreakable disguise. It goes beyond just physical appearance, masking his mana signature from even the most skilled sensors. He realizes he can now fool high-level assassins, a crucial advantage for living in the lion's den. His mind drifts back to the day of his transformation, where he stood before a massive surge of power. Ri-Wun examines the glowing green circuits on his hand, noting a discrepancy in the skill description. A new quest titled Avenger triggers, linking his power to a spectral entity. His eye glows with digital precision as he processes the hidden data within his system. The quest window appears, its details shrouded in mystery, but its presence undeniable. He realizes that defeating the elite squad leader Ike has unlocked a secret path in his growth. The system reveals that his new companion, Kornak, is a fusion of his unique classes and the quest itself. A small masked spirit manifests, born from the synergy of Death's Hand and the Phantom class. Ri-Yun stares down the mana-hungry spirit, accepting the temporary burden for the sake of future power. High above the city, the moon bears witness to his silent vow of growth and domination. He sits perched on the castle walls, a solitary figure plotting his ascent in the shadows. His gaze is fixed on a distant future, far beyond the petty struggles of the present. Supervisor Duns interrupts his brooding, curious about the thoughts of his star pupil. Ri-Wun puts on his Leon mask, smiling innocently about his desire to pass the upcoming test. He feeds the supervisor a humble dream of becoming a branch leader, playing the role of an ambitious youth. Duns laughs heartily, believing the boy's potential could easily carry him to such heights. But the supervisor's expression hardens as he looks down at the three candidates gathered below. He announces the final hurdle to becoming an official 5th-class assassin of the Martong Guild. The condition is brutal in its simplicity. Only one of the 3 applicants will be allowed to pass. The blonde candidate stares intensely, his ambition burning clearly in his eyes. Pala, the blue-haired woman, looks equally resolved to claim the single available spot. Ri-Wun remains impassive, his confidence setting him apart from his desperate peers. Duns clarifies that the title belongs to whoever successfully assassinates the target first. The test officially begins, pitting the 3 aspiring killers against each other under the moonlight. Duns watches them closely, ready to evaluate their preparation before the blood spills. He demands a briefing on the target, testing their information-gathering skills immediately. The supervisor paces the roof, looming over the trainees like a judge in a courtroom. Paula steps forward first, identifying the target as Arok, a 47-year-old merchant. She describes his public persona as a decent shop owner, a cover for whatever sins earned him a death mark. But the real obstacle is his security detail, a trio of mercenaries who never leave his side. She breaks down the threat level, noting 2 bronze-rank warriors and a dangerous silver-rank mage. Paula grumbles about the fairness of the situation, clearly annoyed that she has to share her hard-earned intel. The 3 candidates exchange sharp glares, the tension between them thick enough to cut with a knife. Duns shuts down the complaints, reminding them that this is a winner-takes-all scenario where only one can pass. The realization hits Paula and the blonde youth that they just handed free information to their competition for nothing. Leon just laughs at their distress, noting that he must have skipped the class on friendship and teamwork. Dunn strokes his beard with approval, confirming that selfishness is a virtue in their line of work. He stands atop the fortress wall, declaring the start of a test with absolutely zero restrictions on methods. He emphasizes that using people as tools and discarding them is the very essence of being an assassin. The other 2 candidates look sick to their stomachs, overwhelmed by the ruthless nature of the exam. With a final dramatic command, Duns unleashes the aspiring killers into the moonlit city. They scatter instantly, 3 predators diving into the urban jungle to hunt a single prey. Duns watches them go, his mind drifting back to the absurdity of Leon's initial recruitment. He recalls the briefing where Sapphire mobilized an entire squad of elites just to test one kid. The stakes were high. A massive payout for success, but a humiliating condition for failure. If the veterans couldn't catch the boy, they would be forced to accept him as a special trainee. Duns remembers scoffing at the order, thinking the guild leader had finally lost her mind. He had arrogantly promised to wrap up the hide-and-seek game in 10 minutes flat. But the memory ends in disgrace, with his elite team battered and outsmarted by Leon's traps. That defeat forced him to honor the deal, welcoming the smug victor into the fold as a student. Back in the present, Duns acknowledges that the road to becoming an official member is brutal. He notes that Sapphire personally cranked the difficulty of this final mission to the max. As Leon moves through the night, Duns wonders if he is watching history in the making. The target's stronghold looms under the moonlight, a fortress of stone and secrets. The blonde candidate makes a loud entrance, smashing through a window with zero subtlety. He lands with a surge of mana, convinced his speed has outpaced the magical alarms. He sprints through the halls, patting himself on the back for bypassing the mercenaries. But his stealth is a joke, and the guards immediately spot the intruder in their midst. Paula watches from the shadows as the security force chases the noisy decoy down the hall. She sneers at his incompetence, though she silently thanks him for being such effective bait. With the guards distracted, she focuses on the target's habit of fleeing to a specific safe room. Leon tracks the target to the most unexpected fortress in the mansion, his wife's bedroom. Inside, a woman paces barefoot, her patience worn down to the absolute limit. She screams at her husband, furious that his messy life has brought assassins to their doorstep. Arak tries to calm her down, swearing that the security in this room is impenetrable. From the shadows, a golden eye observes the defenses, confirming they are indeed formidable. High in the rafters, Paula notes that the elite mercenaries have been lured away by the decoy. She grips her dagger, calculating that she can slaughter the remaining regular soldiers in a frontal assault. But inside the room, Arak panics as his wife points a weapon at him instead of an intruder. Paula freezes in her hiding spot, stunned by the sudden twist in the narrative. The wife trembles with rage, recalling the sweet lies he used to whisper to keep her docile. She snaps, accusing him of stealing from her family to fund his debauchery. The blade gleams as she screams about the money wasted on his concubine's gifts. Arak stammers a pathetic excuse about business funds, but it falls on deaf ears. The argument ends in blood as she plunges the knife into his chest. Paula watches in disbelief, realizing her target is being assassinated by his own spouse. The merchant collapses, his life ending not by a professional killer, but by domestic fury. The murder weapon clatters to the floor, echoing in the sudden silence of the room. The wife stands over the corpse, the adrenaline fading into horror at what she has done. She stares blankly at the blood, her mind shattering under the weight of her crime. Guards rush toward the door as she stands amidst the ruin of her marriage. Paula realizes with a sinking heart that the mission objective has been stolen right in front of her. She questions the rules of the game, wondering if a kill steal by a civilian counts as a failure. A sudden thought strikes her. Where in the world is Leon during all this chaos? The moon hangs high over the city, indifferent to the botched assassination attempt. Paula stands on the castle walls, accepting the bitter taste of a failed mission. She mutters the target's name, frustrated that he died so easily without her help. Back at the rendezvous point, she reports the grim reality to the supervisor and her rival. Duns listens impassively, his expression unreadable as the candidates gather. Paula notices Leon standing there fresh as a daisy and wonders if he even participated. The blonde candidate stumbles in, bleeding and confused about why the mercenaries started fighting each other. The chaotic skirmish ends abruptly as the supervisor calls time on the exam. Duns claps his hands with a satisfied grin, declaring that the testing phase is officially over. He shocks the exhausted trainees by announcing that the assassination was a complete success. With a scarred hand, he points directly at Leon, identifying the architect of the victory. The sun rises over the castle walls, illuminating the stunned disbelief of the other candidates. Duns explains that while the wife struck the killing blow, it was Leon's invisible hand that guided the knife. He confirms that Arak's death was a masterpiece of manipulation rather than a simple stabbing. The supervisor names Leon as the winner, praising the ruthless efficiency of the plan. A visual metaphor depicts Leon as a puppet master, controlling the wife with glowing green strings of influence. The blonde candidate and Paula stand frozen, realizing they were playing checkers while Leon was playing 4D chess. Dunn summarizes the feat, noting that Leon weaponized the target's own domestic turmoil to secure the kill. He turns to the prodigy, prompting him to explain the mechanics of his perfect crime to the class. Leon looks at them with a bored expression, as if the answer is too obvious to waste breath on. His green eyes gleam with intelligence as he agrees to break down his strategy. The rivals lean in, desperate to understand how they were outpaced so completely. Leon reveals that the solution lay in the toxic dynamic between Arak and his long-suffering wife. He displays the social web of the target, highlighting the wife, the concubine, and the merchant's greed. He explains that he simply used the internal circumstances of the household as his weapon. The blonde candidate snaps, accusing Leon of receiving the target's name from the branch leader in advance. Leon calmly denies the accusation, stating he learned the target's identity at the exact same moment they did. He points out that Arak was a famous figure in the city, making him easy to identify by name alone. He confirms that their intel about the alcohol business and the concubine was accurate but superficial. The background details of the merchant's life flash by, confirming Leon knew every dirty secret beforehand. He acknowledges that their assessment of the guard levels and the bedroom layout was also correct. But he raises a finger, revealing that he had already finished his investigation long before the test started. While they were scrambling to make plans, he was simply executing a script he wrote days ago. The realization hits his competitors like a physical blow, leaving them speechless. The blonde guy screams in frustration, asking how he could investigate a target he didn't know yet. Leon looks at him with pity, clarifying that he never said he only investigated Arak. He reveals the terrifying scope of his preparation. He gathered dirt on every single potential target in the entire city. Leon explains that he planted a seed in the wife's mind, framing the chaos as a plot by the concubine and her lover. He notes that she was so drunk on his narrative that she hallucinated the other assassins as the lovers in question. A flashback reveals the final push, where he personally delivered a letter that would tip her over the edge. The scene shifts to the moment the wife received the damning evidence from her own butler. The letter revealed that the money for the concubine's lavish gifts was stolen directly from her own family's fortune. Dunn stares in horror, realizing the entire test was a puppet show orchestrated by a single child. The other candidates turn pale, realizing they were unwittingly cast as the villains in the wife's domestic drama. But the supervisor remains skeptical, arguing that rage alone rarely drives a civilian woman to butcher her husband. Leon flashes a wicked grin, admitting that he gave her a little alchemical courage to help the process along. He reveals that he spiked the household's alcohol supply with a potent rage-inducing potion. He adds casually that he also drugged the mercenaries' water supply to minimize the risk to his teammates. Paula asks for details, and he explains the drug cloud's judgment and amplifies aggression to lethal levels. The blonde candidate realizes with a shock that the guards fighting each other wasn't luck, but chemistry. Leon winks, claiming he didn't want his future colleagues dying on a simple entrance exam. The two rivals are left blushing and confused, unsure whether to be terrified or touched by his twisted mercy. Duns puts the pieces together, visualizing how the drugs and the lies combine to turn the wife into a killer. As the sun rises, the supervisor declares that a true assassin doesn't always need to be the one holding the knife. He officially congratulates Leon on passing the test, acknowledging the boy's terrifying efficiency. But Leon isn't done, greedily noting that he plans to collect a double paycheck from the grieving widow. Duns is confused until Leon explains that while the wife struck the blow, the assassins provided the perfect cover story. He points out that only the people on this roof know the truth, that Arak died by domestic violence, not a hit. The wife is now trapped by her own crime, desperate to pay any price to frame the intruders for the murder. Duns stares at the boy, realizing he is looking at a monster disguised as a human. The blonde candidate trembles, accepting that he is standing in the presence of a creature on a completely different level. Paula blushes, her fear mixing with a twisted admiration for the sheer perfection of his work. She mentally resigns from the competition, deciding that fighting for second place is safer than challenging him. Duns dismisses the two failures, ordering them back to the guild while he deals with the winner. He holds Leon back, his expression darkening as he prepares for a serious conversation. The other two leap from the walls, leaving the prodigy alone with his judge. Duns crosses his arms, asking if Leon truly understands the weight of condemning a woman to a lifetime of guilt. Leon reveals the target's dark domestic history, explaining that the wife had been secretly murdering her husband's concubines for years. He notes that the victims' families were powerless to act, as the wife's influential family swept every disappearance under the rug. Duns listens with a grim expression, realizing that Leon weaponized a tragedy that was already festering long before the test began. Leon justifies his actions with cold logic, arguing that despite the chaotic method, the assassination request was fulfilled to the letter. He reminds his superior that the guild's contract only cares about the target's death, not the morality of the hand that strikes the blow. With a ruthless smirk, he lectures Duns that considering a target's deserts or a client's circumstances is a weakness an assassin cannot afford. He challenges the older man's hesitation, asking if the act of murder for money can ever truly be separated from sin. Duns is left sweating as Leon points out that the wife's violent history proves she was never an innocent bystander, just a killer waiting for a push. Leon claims the kill on a technicality, arguing that since his manipulation caused the death, the guild can undeniably take credit for the result. The supervisor looks deeply conflicted, struggling to argue against the boy's terrifyingly efficient, if amoral, results. Standing atop the castle wall, Leon declares that maintaining one's humanity is a luxury reserved only for those with absolute strength. He walks past his mentor, whispering that nothing will ever change as long as Duns remains a servant to the Assassination Guild system. Leon leaves him with a final thought, asserting that true change only comes from building the power to uproot the system entirely. Duns is left alone on the ramparts, the wind carrying away the heavy words of a child who sees the world too clearly. Later, the setting shifts back to the Martong Guild, where the philosophical debate is replaced by official ceremony. Leon stands tall in his new uniform, wearing the confident, slightly arrogant expression of a victor. Sapphire beams with pride, presenting him with the scroll that officially inducts him as a fifth-class assassin of the guild. Green energy swirls around him as the system acknowledges the completion of his hidden quest with a burst of power. Notifications cascade in his vision, confirming a level increase and the achievement of a bonus objective he kept secret. He secures the respect of his rivals and the high expectations of his supervisor, cementing his status as a prodigy. The system rewards his cunning with a generous amount of additional experience points, pushing his growth even further. Sapphire explains his new privileges, granting him the authority to accept official guild requests and climb the ranks. She raises a finger to outline the future, detailing the strict and difficult conditions required for his next promotion. Leon feigns shock at the requirements, though his mind is already racing to find the most efficient shortcut. He asks if a recommendation from a high-ranking member is a valid path, making Sapphire sweat with his naked ambition. She confirms the rule, realizing that this boy has absolutely no intention of grinding through low-level missions like a novice. With a greedy grin, Leon immediately pivots to the financial side, asking about the payout for the mission he just completed. The other assassins look on in confusion, baffled by the new kid's obsession with money right after passing a life-or-death test. He presses for the exact figure, his eyes gleaming with the anticipation of a very specific sum. Sapphire reveals the standard fee was 20 gold, split evenly between an advance and a completion payment. The other candidates watch in stunned silence as the newcomer rewrites the rulebook right in front of them. Leon boldly declares that since he brought the request, executed the kill, and secured the bonus payment, the credit is all his. He confronts the branch leader directly, pointing out that he has already met the 30 gold threshold for the next rank. Sapphire's expression darkens, her patience wearing thin with the boy's endless audacity. With absolute confidence, Leon demands an immediate promotion to fourth-class assassin, skipping the line entirely. Sapphire stands tall, her imposing presence silencing the murmurs of the veteran killers in the room. Shadows dance across her face as she asks if his arrogance has finally blinded him to his station. But Leon just smiles, unfazed by the lethal intent radiating from one of the guild's strongest leaders. She acknowledges his talent, but warns him that looking down on the organization is a dangerous game. She lectures him on the necessity of rules and protocols, the glue that holds their shadowy world together. Sapphire explains that the fourth class is where the amateurs are separated from the true professionals. It is a rank earned through blood, sweat, and the respect of one's peers, not just a single clever trick. She points an accusing finger, declaring that his demand spits in the face of every assassin who climbed the ladder properly. Her gaze softens slightly as she admits that, technically speaking, he has met the financial criteria for advancement. She turns away, offering him a graceful exit by pretending she never heard his foolish request. But Leon refuses the lifeline, his eyes burning with purple mana as he doubles down on his demand. Sapphire spins around in disbelief, warning him that failing to read the room could have fatal consequences. Before the situation explodes, Supervisor Dunn steps in to interrupt his volatile boss. He asks for permission to speak, risking her wrath to offer a different perspective on the prodigy. Sapphire glares at her subordinate, but grants him the floor to explain his interruption. Dunn shocks the room by vouching for the boy, stating that Leon is indeed ready for the fourth-class test. He argues that the boy's ambition isn't disrespect, but a hunger that hasn't been fully fed yet. Sapphire looks confused as Dunn mentions a critical element that Leon has kept hidden during his exams. He points out that while Leon is a genius schemer, he has yet to demonstrate pure, raw physical dominance. The other candidates grumble in the background, forced to admit that Leon won with his brain rather than his blade. The guild hall stands silent as Dunn reveals that the next test is impossible to pass with tricks alone. He suggests using the promotion exam as the ultimate litmus test to see what the boy is really made of. The other assassins grin, realizing this is the perfect opportunity to watch the arrogant rookie get humbled. Sapphire considers the proposal, recalling that even during his recruitment, Leon relied heavily on traps and evasion. A cruel smile spreads across her face as she agrees to the test, eager to see him bleed for his ambition. A heavy mug slams onto the wooden table, the froth spilling over like the tension in the room. The group gathers for a post-mission meal, but the supervisor is still reeling from Leon's reckless demand. His peers look at him with a mix of concern and disbelief, wondering if he actually has a strategy for the impossible test ahead. The waitress interrupts the heavy atmosphere, bringing a round of drinks to celebrate their survival. She serves the table with a smile, placing a glass of milk in front of the terrifying child assassin. Leon casually announces that he plans to skip town and rest until the exam date is finalized. Dunn nearly chokes on his drink, shouting in disbelief at the boy's casual attitude toward training. With a milk mustache, Leon asks if official members are allowed to roam outside the branch's territory. Dunn confirms the rules but remains skeptical, while Leon promises to return in time to check the notice board. The supervisor narrows his eyes, sensing that rest is just a code word for another one of the boy's schemes. Leon wipes his face with a smirk, offering no further explanation for his sudden vacation. He raises his glass to the table, encouraging everyone to drink their fill and forget the stress of the day. The tavern glows warmly in the night, a brief sanctuary before the harsh reality of their profession returns. Outside, the narrator notes that moments of peace like this are a luxury that is about to become extinct. Once he ascends to the fourth class, the relentless grind of mandatory requests will leave no room for breaks. Leon walks away from the city gates, knowing he must seize this final window of freedom to pursue his own goals. He stands alone on a precipice, the wind tugging at his cloak as he looks out over the vast, dangerous world. His destination is a place of nightmares, the legendary dark zone where humanity fears to tread. His green eye glows with anticipation, ready to return to the land of death that forged his family's legacy. The sound of thundering hooves breaks his concentration, signaling the approach of a large group. A heavily armed convoy tears down the road, led by knights clad in pristine armor. At the head of the formation rides a noble with pink hair, looking every bit the arrogant aristocrat. The leader spots a lone figure by the roadside and pulls on the reins, his curiosity piqued. He stares down at the hooded traveler sitting in the dirt, clearly unimpressed by the sight. The noble demands to know what a peasant is doing loitering in the path of his grand procession. Leon slumps over, instantly slipping into a new character to manipulate the situation. He pulls his hood tight, hiding his face and his true intentions from the approaching threat. The knights slow to a halt, surrounding the helpless traveler with an air of superiority. Leon puts on a pitiful voice, claiming a twisted ankle and begging the noble for a ride to the next village. But the noble sneers in disgust, threatening to execute the boy on the spot for the crime of delaying his carriage. A sly smirk tugs at the corner of his mouth, hidden from the arrogant commander's view. He calmly points out that the rhythmic hoofbeat suggests the convoy isn't exactly racing against time. The pink-haired commander, Kennel, recoils in sheer disbelief that a peasant would dare speak logic to him. Leon instantly deploys his ultimate weapon, unleashing a teary-eyed plea that radiates manufactured innocence. The commander and his horse both stare in silence, their aggression neutralized by the awkwardness of the situation. A sudden thud from the carriage interrupts the standoff, signaling that the VIP has been listening. A voice from within orders Kennel to stop being a bully and put the poor child inside the carriage. Kennel shouts his refusal immediately, horrified by the thought of a dirty commoner soiling the luxury interior. The voice compromises with a mischievous tone, suggesting that the commander simply share his own horse instead. Before Kennel can process the indignity, he finds himself awkwardly sharing his saddle with the grinning hitchhiker. His subordinate struggles to stifle a laugh, complimenting the commander on how well the accessory suits him. Under the noble's glare, Ryun maintains his cover, introducing himself simply as Leon from Peyton. As the carriage rolls on, he silently thanks the mysterious lady for playing right into his hands. Kennel grumbles that the boy should be grateful for his luck, unaware that he is the one being played. But as the smile fades, Ryun's internal monologue reveals that luck had absolutely nothing to do with it. He identifies the passenger as Saintine Rose, the exiled heir of a minor noble house bearing the rose emblem. A flashback shows his hand tracing the map, confirming he calculated this exact interception point days ago. He knows their history. A quiet life in the frontier that shattered when their family head died suddenly. He analyzes the escort, noting that despite their armor, these men lack the discipline of true knights. They are merely loyal soldiers who were hastily promoted to protect their mistress on her journey to exile. One of the guards sighs heavily, lamenting the endless hardships his young lady is forced to endure. He mutters that the tragedy of the Rose family is a burden too heavy for one girl to carry. Ryun listens intently, his sharp gaze hiding the fact that he is gathering intel on his new companions. But his blood runs cold when the guard explicitly blames the Sermon family for their downfall. The soldier's face twists with bitterness, cursing the very name that Ryun secretly bears. Ryun recalls his own investigation, which stopped at the exile and never mentioned his family's involvement. He stares ahead with a hardened expression, trying to understand how his house got tangled in this mess. The guards discuss the rumors, unaware that the villain they are cursing is sitting right next to their commander. A vision of a poisoned murder scene plays out as they accuse the Sermons of assassinating the Rosehead to hide corruption. The moon rises over the silent mountains, shining down on a boy who realizes his enemies have been very busy. Ryun processes the intel under the moonlight, piecing together the tragic history of the Rose family. It was a classic case of a smaller house getting crushed between two whales, specifically the Sermine and Patton families. The friction began when the Rose family, technically from an enemy nation, aligned themselves with the Sermon banner. Their eldest son died serving the Sermon family, and in return, the Sermons promised massive financial aid. But this sudden rise provoked the jealousy of the rival Ani family, who shook hands with the Pattons to destroy them. The result was the brutal assassination of the Rose family head, leaving the house in ruins. With their leader dead, the fallen house had no choice but to embark on a humiliating exile to the Darren kingdom. Only the newly knighted Kennel and a handful of loyal retainers remained to protect the young lady. Saintine Rose sleeps uneasily, unaware that her nightmare is far from over. The camp settles in for the night, a tiny island of light in a vast, hostile darkness. She curls up in the carriage, stripped of her status and left with nothing but her life. But Ryun knows that her life is exactly what the Ani family's second son is still hunting for. Kennel stares into the fire, clarifying that the true villains here are the Patton and Ani families, not the Sermons. He reveals that this exile was only possible because the Sermon family pulled strings to grant them sanctuary. Despite their own struggles, the Sermons squeezed out every last copper to fund the Rose family's escape. Kennel tosses a twig into the flames, his cynicism melting away to reveal genuine gratitude. The soldiers raise their mugs, toasting the very family they were cursing just hours ago. A guard offers the helpless traveler another bowl of soup, completely bought in by the act. Ryun accepts with a bright, innocent smile, playing the role of the grateful peasant to perfection. Kennel asks if the boring political talk was too much for a kid, but Ryun claims it was interesting. Internally, he suppresses a laugh, thinking about just how deeply involved he is in that boring story. Kennel suddenly questions his own judgment, wondering if it's safe to be so open with a stranger. He realizes he's just spilled state secrets to a random child he picked up on the road. He teases the boy for being bold enough to block a convoy, and Ryun sweats nervously at the accusation. The soldiers note that their commander seems lighter, having finally vented his burdens to someone. Kennel's gaze softens as he looks at the carriage, knowing the heaviest burden lies on the sleeping girl. Ryun drinks his soup, his mind racing as he identifies the real problem with this escort mission. He realizes that Kennel and his men, while loyal, are too inexperienced to sense the true nature of the threat. They are completely oblivious to the danger that is currently stalking them through the dark woods. The Ani family isn't satisfied with just political ruin. Their depraved second son wants Saintine for himself. Under the cold moonlight, Ryun watches from the cliffs, his eyes tracking the movement below. He leaps from the shadows, landing silently in the dense forest to prepare his next move. He confirms that a tail is following them, but decides to let them be since the intel is already leaked. Instead of fighting, he decides it's more efficient to turn the forest into a nightmare of traps for the pursuers. The guards spot him returning covered in filth, confused by the sudden mess on their guest. Ryun flashes a sheepish grin, claiming he just took a tumble while answering nature's call. He walks away with a hidden trowel while the guards advise the injured boy to just rest and ask for help next time. Behind him, the forest floor is now riddled with pitfall traps, buying the group precious time against the enemy. Back in his bedroll, he drifts off to sleep, considering his hard labor a fair trade for the soup he ate. The sun rises over the rugged mountains, signaling the start of another dangerous day of travel. As the group prepares to depart, Ryun thanks them for the ride, ready to go his own way. Kennel questions him, suspicious of what a lone child is doing so close to the deadly dark zone. Ryun reveals his cover story, displaying a collection of mushrooms and potions to prove he's a traveling peddler. He explains his simple business plan to buy monster materials in Dassam and sell them for a profit in Peyton. The commander accepts the story, asking if this is where their paths must finally diverge. But before he leaves, Kennel extends a hand, offering a small glass bottle as a parting gift. He insists Ryun take the potion, noting that his injured leg probably hasn't fully healed yet. The potion glows with a warm light, a high-quality gift sent directly by the young lady in the carriage. Ryun glances at the window, catching the silhouette of Saintine Rose watching him go. Kennel scratches his head awkwardly, admitting that thanks to Ryun, they found a moment of peace she was grateful for. Ryun holds the bottle, touched by the genuine kindness of people who have every reason to be bitter. He bows respectfully, thanking them one last time before turning to leave. Kennel warns him not to seek them out in Daron, trying to protect the boy from the stigma of their exile. The guards smile as they watch their commander, noting that he's a softy at heart despite his grumpy face. Kennel snaps back to his usual self, shouting at his men to stop gossiping and get the convoy moving. The carriage rolls away into the dust, leaving Ryun alone on the road once more. He stares at the red potion, the weight of their kindness heavy in his hand. With a decisive pop, he uncorks the bottle, but his expression is unreadable. He tilts his head back and downs the potion, accepting the gift and the goodwill it represents. A few drops spill onto the dry earth, marking the end of his brief alliance with the Rose family. Ryun senses the vibration in the earth before the sound even reaches his ears. A cloud of dust erupts on the horizon as 6 riders charge forward with lethal intent. His analytical eye breaks down the threat, spotting 2 mercenaries and a pair of rookie swordsmen. But the real danger lies in the mage riding at the center, a variable that complicates everything. Leading the pack is a hooded figure, radiating the distinct, arrogant mana of a noble. Ryun identifies him instantly as Guruta Ani, the sadistic second son of the rival house. The noble's face is twisted into a manic grin, his teeth bared like a rabid dog on the scent. The hunting party thunders past the peasant on the roadside, completely ignoring his presence. Garuda is so focused on his prey that he fails to notice the monster standing in the dust. Ryun watches them go, his innocent facade dropping the moment their backs are turned. His green eye sharpens, calculating the distance and the speed of the pursuit. He realizes with annoyance that the enemy squad is far more elite than he anticipated. He clicks his tongue, frustrated that his forest traps barely served as a speed bump. He looks down at the empty bottle in his hand, weighing the cost of his involvement. The system appraises the glass, confirming it held a high-grade potion worth a small fortune. A wry smile touches his lips as he realizes the transaction just became complicated. He marvels at the girl's stupidity, giving away a treasure to a stranger she met just yesterday. She is a fugitive hanging by a thread, yet she still acts with the naive generosity of a saint. He knows exactly what awaits her. A targeted kidnapping and a massacre for her loyal guards. Green energy flares around him as he decides that the potion counts as an advance payment for his services. A magic circle ignites beneath his feet, preparing to bridge the gap between hunter and prey. He calls out a name, summoning the spectral entity born from his dark class. Kornak manifests from the void, a masked spirit ready to get its hands dirty for the first time. Ryun grins, eager to test the capabilities of his new partner on some deserving targets. Meanwhile, the Rose convoy pushes their horses to the breaking point, sensing the danger. Kenil looks back, his face pale as he realizes their head start has evaporated. He warns the carriage, apologizing for the rough ride as they kick into high gear. His subordinates look confused, wondering why their commander is suddenly so on edge. Kenil screams the warning, confirming that hostile mana signatures are closing in fast. He barks desperate orders, preparing to sacrifice himself so the lady can reach the border. Kenil calculates that reaching the border is their only salvation, as the Ani family won't dare cross Darren's guards. Realizing they can't outrun the pursuit together, the commander makes the hard call to stay behind and buy time. His subordinates hesitate, but he orders them to rendezvous at the border, prioritizing the lady's safety over his own. A bead of sweat rolls down his face as he forces a confident smile, knowing this might be his final stand. He admits the Ani Knights are out of his league, but his pride as a Rose Knight refuses to let him flee. The enemy force arrives like a thundercloud, a mix of heavy cavalry and hooded figures blocking out the sun. The leader of the hunting party spots the lone obstacle in the road, amused by the futile resistance. A spear plunges into the earth, bringing the galloping death squad to a sudden, dusty halt. Kenil roars at the intruders, demanding to know who dares chase the exiled Rose family's carriage. He draws his line in the sand, threatening to take heads if they don't turn their horses around immediately. A chilling chuckle echoes from beneath a hood, completely unimpressed by the pink-haired knight's bravado. The figure mocks the threat, finding the idea of a mere knight stopping them to be hilarious. The hood is pulled back, revealing not just an enemy, but a face that drips with condescension. A hand casually removes the disguise, signaling that the time for hiding is over. Kenil stammers the name Guruta Ani, assuming the gray-haired man is the sadistic noble himself. But the veteran ignores the accusation, turning to the hooded figure beside him to confirm the plan. He dismisses Kenil as a distraction, ordering the rest of the squad to bypass the knight and capture the woman. The riders surge forward like a flood, ignoring Kenil's desperate attempt to hold the line. Kenil swings his sword in a panic, realizing he can't stop them all from passing him. A blast of magical energy slams into him from the side, punishing him for losing focus. A hooded mage rides past, his mana signature revealing him to be a second circle caster or higher. Kenil crashes into the dirt, his defense shattered in a single exchange as the main force rides on. The gray-haired commander wags a finger, telling Kenil to relax because his opponent is right here. A heavy boot stomps down, pinning the fallen knight to the ground before he can rise. Kenil looks up in horror, finally recognizing the traitor as Ciso, the former commander of his own Rose Knights. Ciso sneers alongside a mercenary, admitting he sold out his loyalty for cold, hard cash. He delivers a brutal kick to Kenil's face, mocking the idea that a fallen family deserves any allegiance. Steel clashes against steel as Ciso brings his heavy blade down to finish the job. Kenil barely blocks the strike, screaming at his former superior for having absolutely no chivalry left. Ciso presses the advantage with a cruel grin, reminding the boy that honor doesn't stop you from dying today. Ciso swings his blade with the force of a man who has traded his honor for a paycheck, declaring chivalry dead in this new world. Kenil barely deflects the lethal strike, his loyalty acting as the only shield against the traitor's overwhelming power. The traitor pauses to offer a twisted lifeline, suggesting Kenil abandon his doomed house and find a master who isn't exiled. But the young knight spits blood in defiance, refusing to let the word betrayal even enter his vocabulary. Ciso sighs, bored by such stubborn morality, and decides to wrap up this little reunion so he can collect his reward. He stands over his defeated former subordinate, offering a hollow apology before raising his sword for the execution. The blade descends, a silver streak of death aimed straight for Kenil's neck. But the execution is interrupted by a violent explosion of green mana that blasts the aggressor backward. Ciso's eyes widen in shock, blinded by a radiant energy that shouldn't exist on this battlefield. A spectral entity manifests from the light, a chaotic swirl of green malice that blocks the path to the fallen knight. The spirit Kornak fully materializes, grinning like a demon who just found a new toy to break. Ciso grits his teeth, realizing too late that a third party has crashed the party with lethal intent. The spirit moves with blinding speed, turning the air itself into a barrage of razor-sharp energy projectiles. It tears through the enemy ranks, turning an organized ambush into a chaotic scramble for survival. The ground erupts as the spirit slams into the cliffside, reshaping the terrain with pure magical force. Enemy mages desperately erect barriers, terrified by the skill level of this mysterious, invisible assailant. Siso takes a direct hit, coughing up blood as the green energy ravages his internal organs. From the shadows, Ryun grumbles about the cost of doing business, deciding that one bowl of soup is worth exactly one saved life. A sword spins through the air, disarmed from its owner by the sheer force of the spectral assault. Chaos reigns as the invisible attacker dismantles the enemy formation with surgical precision. But near the carriage, the battle is far grimmer, with blood staining the pristine white vehicle of the noble lady. 2 loyal guards stand their ground, their bodies battered and broken, but their resolve unshaken. They gasp for air, knowing that their strength is failing against the endless waves of attackers. The enemy mocks their futile resistance, laughing at the idea that loyalty can stop a blade. The hooded riders suggest they just die quietly, pointing out the massive gap in their combat levels. A soft voice cuts through the violence, commanding the slaughter to cease immediately. The carriage door opens, and a single, elegant step signals the arrival of the prize everyone is fighting for. Saintine Rose emerges into the carnage, thanking her men for their service while ordering them to stand down. She draws a dagger, not to fight, but to negotiate the only currency she has left, her own life. With the blade pressed to her throat, she gambles everything, betting that her captors need her alive more than they want her guards dead. The carriage stands silent amidst the carnage, a grim monument to the ambush that decimated the convoy. Siso steps through the smoke, his eyes locking onto the woman who represents the last flicker of the Rose bloodline. Saintine Rose steps out with surprising dignity, praising her fallen defenders for enduring as long as they did. She confronts the traitor, offering to surrender quietly on the condition that her remaining men are spared. A dagger presses against her own throat as she threatens to destroy the very prize they came to capture. She glares at Siso, gambling that his employers want a living hostage rather than a corpse. But the traitor just sighs, looking at her like a naive child who doesn't understand the rules of the game. He cruelly points out that since she never reached the safety of Darren, she holds absolutely no political leverage. The realization hits her like a physical blow, her hand trembling as she understands she is nothing more than a loose end. With a casual swing of his blade, Siso unleashes a shockwave to knock the weapon from her hand and prove her helplessness. He grabs her roughly, eager to show her exactly what happens when a powerless noble resists a mana-wielding knight. Her loyal guards scream in impotent rage, unable to break through the enemy lines to save their mistress. Saintine winces in pain, bracing herself for the humiliation of capture and the inevitable end of her house. But a shadow drops from the sky, delivering a brutal, gravity-assisted kick directly to the traitor's face. Saintine looks back in disbelief, tears freezing in her eyes as her desperate prayer is answered by a violent miracle. Ryun lands with the grace of a predator, sending the attackers scrambling back in a cloud of dust and confusion. Siso stumbles back, blood dripping from his nose as he screams to know who dared to interrupt him. Ryun stands over the fallen, casually mentioning that he's here to settle the debt for the potion she gave him. He draws his dagger, suggesting that the soup and medicine can serve as an advance payment for his services. With a professional smirk, he asks if she would like to officially commission a Martong assassin to handle the trash. Saintine stares at him blankly, her brain struggling to process the sudden shift from tragedy to business negotiation. Ryun waits for the answer, looking every bit the mercenary despite his young appearance. Siso looks bewildered, unable to understand why the infamous Martong Guild would interfere in a private family purge. He demands to know why a killer for hire is protecting a ruined house that can't possibly afford him. Saintine's mind races, wondering if this boy represents a hidden connection to the legendary Asan lineage of assassins. Desperate to secure his help, she stammers out an offer of 30 gold, likely her entire remaining fortune. Ryun grins under his hood, praising her for having good situational awareness in a crisis. But his expression sharpens as he looks at the enemy forces, declaring that her offer is unfortunately not enough. He tallies the threats: a sadistic noble, a traitorous commander, and a high-ranking mage waiting in the wings. He bluntly informs her that 30 gold is only enough to pay for the head of the knight standing in front of her. Saintine clasps her hands in desperation, agreeing to give him absolutely everything he wants in exchange for their lives. Ryun accepts the contract, his eyes burning with the green fire of a necromancer ready to work. Siso scoffs at the boy's boldness, questioning what kind of assassin reveals his face so openly to his enemies. Ryun draws his blade, retorting that hiding in the shadows is a tactic for cowards with small dreams. He prepares to strike, declaring that a real predator has no need for masks or stealth. A massive shockwave blasts the traitor backward, proving that his confidence is backed by overwhelming power. Ryun descends on his prey, while Siso coughs up blood and realizes he is woefully outmatched. Saintin watches in stunned silence, the wind from the attack whipping past her face. Ryun grins, thrilled to be executing his first official commission for the Martong Guild. He clenches his glowing hand, determined to build a reputation that justifies the massive price tag he just negotiated. Siso struggles to his feet, refusing to accept defeat at the hands of a mere child. He screams in defiance, warning the boy that veteran swordsmen are not such easy prey. Ryun glances back with a cold, mocking expression, questioning who exactly "we" refers to. Siso answers with a lethal swing, aiming to split the arrogant assassin in two. Ryun weaves through the air, dodging the heavy blade with frustrating ease. The traitor slams his sword into the ground, missing his target, but showing terrifying strength. Siso yells at his fallen comrades, demanding they stop playing dead and join the fight immediately. He rallies the remaining traitors, warning them that their opponent is a high-tier threat from the Asan family. The soldiers coordinate their attack, shouting that Ryun made a fatal mistake choosing the losing side. They unleash a synchronized assault, confident their combined swordsmanship will finally corner him. Ryun wraps himself in a protective aura, looking at their formation with amused pity. He activates body domination, his physical form blurring as he charges straight into the teeth of the attack. A system window flashes, confirming that his speed has been magically accelerated to superhuman levels. He tears through their ranks like a green comet, moving faster than their eyes can follow. Siso panics as he loses visual contact, unable to detect any mana signature to track the boy. The traitor swings wildly at shadows, his discipline crumbling into pure fear. Ryun dances around them, mocking their desperate attempts to find a rhythm against a ghost. A single green eye glows in the chaos, signaling that playtime is officially over. He unleashes a devastating counterattack, his speed turning one strike into a dozen. The synchronized formation shatters instantly under the weight of his absolute dominance. Ryun's eye flashes with a lethal green light, signaling the start of a one-sided massacre. Siso swings his blade in a panic, but he is fighting a phantom that moves faster than thought. The traitor screams in confusion, unable to tell if his opponent is a man or a magical illusion. He realizes with horror that despite the visual chaos, he cannot sense a single drop of mana. Ryun appears from the blind spot, his presence screaming danger a split second before the strike. Siso tries to rally his crumbling formation, shouting for discipline while sweating bullets. But Ryun is already inside his guard, calmly listing the debuffs he has already applied. The commander freezes, realizing he has been hit with physical weakness and sensory disruption without noticing. Rage mixes with terror as he identifies the forbidden necromancer abilities fueling the boy's power. A scream tears through the battlefield as green energy and steel finally meet flesh. The formation disintegrates into a chaotic storm of blood and magic as Ryun tears through them. His eyes burn with cold fury, channeling the pain of the betrayed Rose family into every strike. Silence finally reclaims the desert road, leaving the carriage standing safe amidst the aftermath. Kenno limps forward, his armor battered but his spirit soaring as he calls out to his liege. He smiles through the blood, checking on his people with the relief of a man who cheated death. The reunion is sweet, with the survivors gathering around the commander who refused to run. Saintine breaks down in tears, the overwhelming relief shattering her noble composure. Ryun watches from the sidelines, his job done and his green eye fading back to normal. Kennel's subordinates look at him in awe, stunned that their commander actually held the line. But the touching moment is ruined as Kennel yells at them for disobeying his order to flee. He clarifies that he didn't do it alone, pointing to the mysterious mage who dropped from the sky. He lists the boy's achievements: crushing the traitor, silencing the mage, and capturing the noble leader. Kornak hovers silently, holding the unconscious bodies of their enemies like trophies. The group turns their gaze to the spectral entity, wondering just what kind of monster saved them. Ryun prepares the final part of the transaction, weaving a complex magic circle in the air. The green light intensifies as he manipulates the spatial magic to deliver the goods. He unceremoniously dumps the bound body of Garuda Ani right at Saintine's feet. Saintine stares at the boy she thought was a peasant, struggling to reconcile Leon with this powerhouse. Kennel stammers out the truth, revealing that their savior claims to be an assassin from the Martong Guild. The pieces fall into place, explaining how a single boy dismantled an elite squad with such terrifying ease. Desperate to survive, the traitor Siso falls to his knees and offers to triple the bounty. He frantically cites guild rules, claiming that assassins only care about gold, not the client. Ryun's eye glows with irritation, bored by the noise of a man who doesn't get it. A blade of green energy silences the argument permanently, cleaving the traitor in two. The body collapses in a heap, proving that some debts can only be paid in blood. Ryun sneers, insulted that the traitor thought he was a cheap mercenary with no standards. He turns to Saintine with a playful grin, checking if she remembers the price of her survival. He reminds her that the Martong Guild has a zero-tolerance policy for unpaid contracts. With a terrifying smile, he asks if she understands exactly what kind of organization she hired. Saintine trembles but nods, fully aware that she has made a deal with a devil. But Ryun waves it off, admitting he knows the Rose family is currently penniless. Saintine looks surprised, realizing he isn't going to extract the payment from her corpse. He instructs her to file an official request for the 30 gold later to keep the guild happy. As for the rest, he declares it a private debt to be collected at a time of his choosing. Saintine blushes and clutches her chest, agreeing to the secret terms of their verbal contract. Business concluded, he orders them to gather their wits and head for the border immediately. He promises to handle the cleanup, ensuring no pursuers will be left to chase them. The group prepares to move out, leaving the carnage of the battlefield behind them. He advises them to keep their story simple for the border guards. They were attacked and survived. The soldiers watch him with awe, impressed by the cold efficiency of their young savior. Kenil nods solemnly, swearing to follow the instructions to ensure his lady's safety. The commander calls out to Leon, his voice thick with a mix of gratitude and confusion. Riwon stops and glances back, his silhouette framed against the purple sky. He offers a final mysterious smile, enjoying the role of the enigmatic hero. Green mana swirls around him as he levitates, defying gravity to make his exit. He ascends into the air, leaving the Rose family staring up in stunned silence. Kenil turns to his subordinate, confirming that the boy really did just fly away. A residue of green energy lingers on the ground, the only proof he was ever there. The commander realizes with a shiver that assassin was likely just a convenient label. He recalls the monstrous spirit the boy summoned, knowing that no ordinary killer commands the dead. The commander's mind conjures the image of Veda, the legendary necromancer who stands atop a mountain of skulls. He theorizes that the boy isn't just a prodigy, but the secret disciple of that terrifying ancient master.